Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Today was the second night that Tom had to stay inside the hospital. Following the advice of their school nurse, Tom had made an appointment, and given his situation, he didn't have to wait for long. He had quickly been assigned a private room, though he ended up having to sleep over on Monday, since the surgeon didn't have any gap to get to him. Tom didn't mind that. The hospital staff had given him enough painkillers that he had easily slept until Tuesday morning. When he woke up, he saw that he had 17 missed calls from his mother alone and 9 more from his father. At some point, his father had notified him via a message that the hospital had already informed them and that the two of them would be with him this evening. With a few more hours to go until his dental surgery, Tom had browsed the web via his phone. The first thing he had searched for was any recent news. He half closed his eyes as he read the headlines, expecting to see Gary's name or the headlines reading werewolf caught. But there was none of that, and just news on Billy. His surgery was rather uneventful. From what he had been told, implanting a new tooth was a rather routine procedure, and they had also taken care of the cuts that had appeared in his mouth. I wonder how Gary is coping. Where did he run off to after leaving me at the nurse's office? I'm seriously worried. I mean, if he ever found out who did this to me, there's a good chance he could, Tom gulped, kill those two. At that moment, the two people who were responsible for Tom's absence from school burst into the room through the door. Tom, how are you feeling? Did the surgery go well? Let's see that beautiful smile of yours. His mother called out as she rushed over to his bedside. She hugged him to the point that Tom had trouble breathing. He tapped his mother on the shoulder, asking her to release him. Noticing this, his mother pulled back and allowed Tom to give her a shy smile. It had been a while since he had seen his parents, so it was a bit saddening that he had to be in a hospital for them to find some time. Both of them were still wearing their white lab coats, indicating that they had rushed over from work to visit. Holly and James Green were like the living embodiments of what one pictured when hearing the word scientist, including the thick black glasses on their faces. Tom's mother was blonde and rather good-looking. Her son sometimes lamented that he apparently got more from his father than his mother, including his black hair, which was hard to see given his haircut. James Green wasn't bad-looking, but he wasn't exactly someone who would be described as handsome either, which sometimes made Tom wonder how his father had managed to get his mother. His pet theory was that among all the other scientists, he was probably the best-looking one. They must have even asked for time off to visit me, Tom thought with a guilty conscience. Both of them worked in a Tier 2 city. Due to the long drive, they wouldn't always come back every day. Tom, me and your father have been talking about your situation. We've decided that it would be for the best if we move you from Slough to the Tier 2 city Bracknell. It took Tom a second to comprehend what his mother had just said. It was one of the many possibilities he had considered his mother would say when she found out. While he wouldn't mind seeing his parents more often, it wasn't a given that would actually happen. From what he had heard, their company actually had sleeping rooms for their personnel. We can sell up the house and all move into a nice apartment in Bracknell. We're not too far off from completing our big project. With the bonus we will receive and our contracts being up for renewal soon, we'll be able to afford a place that is just as nice as this one to move you to a new school. It'll be much safer there. Her approach was gentle, but Tom had already prepared what he would say to that. You know that's not true, Mom. It's only safer on the surface. Tom replied, looking in her eyes, to stress that he wasn't having that. He understood that at the end of the day, his caring parents were just trying to look out for him. There are even bigger gangs in the upper-tier cities, you know that. It's just more behind the scenes. Besides, Westbridge is plenty safe. Something like this has never happened to me before. It was just a one-time incident. I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Tom tried his best to downplay the part, since he honestly didn't know what would happen the next time he met the bullying duo. He didn't want to leave his school, and most of all, he didn't want to leave his best friend Gary behind. He had never liked talking to people, but somehow Gary had made it seem less bothersome, making him treasure his friendship with his best friend all the more. There was a time in Tom's life when he had needed someone, yet his parents had been too busy with work, his teachers didn't seem approachable. So the only one he had been able to rely on had been Gary. Now that his best friend was struggling with a supernatural problem, he couldn't leave him to his own devices. He somehow had to convince his parents to let him stay in school, even if it was a one-time thing. The important point is that it did happen, which means it could very well happen again. We've already been notified that you have refused to tell who exactly did that to you. So how can we believe that this was merely a one-time thing? We live in a good part of Slough, so we're lucky to not be affected by what's been going on, but at the same time we can't bear to be away from you and allow such a thing to repeat. As if that wasn't enough, we've heard about the recent high school student killings. That alone would be enough reason for us to pull you out of this place. Listening to his mother, she made good points, better than her son for wanting to stay in this dangerous town. It seemed she had already made up her mind, which meant there was only one person who could help him win over his mother. Although he lost more times than not, once in a while his father managed to pull through. Dad, I get good grades, I have good friends, and even my teachers somewhat like me. If I get put into a different environment, it could really affect me, and this year I'll have my exams. I can't afford to fail my GCSEs. Don't you two always talk about how compromise is often important for your experiments and research? Isn't there a way we can compromise? Tom practically pleaded. His mother was more than a little annoyed that Tom had decided to ask his father for help. Nevertheless, she also knew that her son only did so when he regarded something as very important. His father, who had been quite calm during their visit so far, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. We can compromise and allow you to stay until the end of this school year then. His father offered. By that point, we should have finished with our project, so we will be ready to move you out once you get your results. You can't say we are affecting your studies then, can you? It was clear from his mother's demeanor that she wanted to argue that a school year was too long. Tom knew his parents long enough to recognize that this was the best offer he would get out of them. Deal. I just hope that time will be enough for us to figure out what to do with Gary's condition. How and when am I supposed to tell him that I will leave, though? Today was the second night that Tom had to stay inside the hospital. Following the advice of their school nurse, Tom had made an appointment, and given his situation, he didn't have to wait for long. He had quickly been assigned a private room, though he ended up having to sleep over on Monday, since the surgeon didn't have any gap to get to him. Tom didn't mind that. The hospital staff had given him enough painkillers that he had easily slept until Tuesday morning. When he woke up, he saw that he had 17 missed calls from his mother alone and 9 more from his father. At some point, his father had notified him via a message that the hospital had already informed them and that the two of them would be with him this evening. With a few more hours to go until his dental surgery, Tom had browsed the web via his phone. The first thing he had searched for was any recent news. He half closed his eyes as he read the headlines, expecting to see Gary's name or the headlines reading werewolf caught. But there was none of that and just news on Billy. His surgery was rather uneventful. From what he had been told, implanting a new tooth was a rather routine procedure, and they had also taken care of the cuts that had appeared in his mouth. I wonder how Gary is coping. Where did he run off to after leaving me at the nurse's office? I'm seriously worried. I mean, if he ever found out who did this to me, there's a good chance he could, Tom gulped, kill those two. At that moment, the two people who were responsible for Tom's absence from school burst into the room through the door. Tom, how are you feeling? Did the surgery go well? Let's see that beautiful smile of yours. His mother called out as she rushed over to his bedside. She hugged him to the point that Tom had trouble breathing. He tapped his mother on the shoulder, asking her to release him. Noticing this, his mother pulled back and allowed Tom to give her a shy smile. It had been a while since he had seen his parents, so it was a bit saddening that he had to be in hospital for them to find some time. Both of them were still wearing their white lab coats, indicating that they had rushed over from work to visit. Holly and James Green were like the living embodiments of what one pictured when hearing the word scientist, including the thick black glasses on their faces. Tom's mother was blonde and rather good-looking. Her son sometimes lamented that he apparently got more from his father than his mother, including his black hair, which was hard to see given his haircut. James Green wasn't bad-looking, but he wasn't exactly someone who would be described as handsome either, which sometimes made Tom wonder how his father had managed to get his mother. His pet theory was that among all the other scientists, he was probably the best-looking one. They must have even asked for time off to visit me, Tom thought with a guilty conscience. Both of them worked in a Tier 2 city. Due to the long drive, they wouldn't always come back every day. Tom, me and your father have been talking about your situation. We've decided that it would be for the best if we move you from Slough to the Tier 2 city Bracknell. It took Tom a second to comprehend what his mother had just said. It was one of the many possibilities he had considered his mother would say when she found out. While he wouldn't mind seeing his parents more often, it wasn't a given that would actually happen. From what he had heard, their company actually had sleeping rooms for their personal. We can sell up the house and all move into a nice apartment in Bracknell. We're not too far off from completing our big project. With the bonus we will receive and our contracts being up for renewal soon, we'll be able to afford a place that is just as nice as this one to move you to a new school. It'll be much safer there. Her approach was gentle, but Tom had already prepared what he would say to that. You know that's not true, Mom. It's only safer on the surface. Tom replied, looking in her eyes, to stress that he wasn't having that. He understood that at the end of the day, his caring parents were just trying to look out for him. There are even bigger gangs in the upper-tier cities, you know that. It's just more behind the scenes. Besides, Westbridge is plenty safe. Something like this has never happened to me before. It was just a one-time incident. I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Tom tried his best to downplay the part, since he honestly didn't know what would happen the next time he met the bullying duo. He didn't want to leave his school, and most of all, he didn't want to leave his best friend Gary behind. He had never liked talking to people, but somehow Gary had made it seem less bothersome, making him treasure his friendship with his best friend all the more. There was a time in Tom's life when he had needed someone, yet his parents had been too busy with work, his teachers didn't seem approachable, so the only one he had been able to rely on had been Gary. Now that his best friend was struggling with a supernatural problem, he couldn't leave him to his own devices. He somehow had to convince his parents to let him stay in school, even if it was a one-time thing. The important point is that it did happen, which means it could very well happen again. We've already been notified that you have refused to tell who exactly did that to you. So how can we believe that this was merely a one-time thing? We live in a good part of Slough, so we're lucky to not be affected by what's been going on, but at the same time we can't bear to be away from you and allow such a thing to repeat. As if that wasn't enough, we've heard about the recent high school student killings. That alone would be enough reason for us to pull you out of this place. Listening to his mother, she made good points, better than her son for wanting to stay in this dangerous town. It seemed she had already made up her mind, which meant there was only one person who could help him win over his mother. Although he lost more times than not, once in a while his father managed to pull through. Dad, I get good grades, I have good friends, and even my teachers somewhat like me. If I get put into a different environment, it could really affect me, and this year I'll have my exams. I can't afford to fail my GCSEs. Don't you two always talk about how compromise is often important for your experiments and research? Isn't there a way we can compromise? Tom practically pleaded. His mother was more than a little annoyed that Tom had decided to ask his father for help. Nevertheless, she also knew that her son only did so when he regarded something as very important. His father, who had been quite calm during their visit so far, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. We can compromise and allow you to stay until the end of this school year then. His father offered. By that point, we should have finished with our project, so we will be ready to move you out once you get your results. You can't say we are affecting your studies then, can you? It was clear from his mother's demeanor that she wanted to argue that a school year was too long. Tom knew his parents long enough to recognize that this was the best offer he would get out of them. Deal. I just hope that time will be enough for us to figure out what to do with Gary's condition. How and when am I supposed to tell him that I will leave, though? What Gary didn't know was that this exact thought that he had would come far sooner than he thought. Outside his apartment block, a figure could be seen standing through the smog staring at the very top into Gary's apartment building. Gary still had 3 days of exclusion left, which meant that today was another day that he was technically free to do as he wished until practice time, while everyone else's age would be stuck in school. Most kids would have enjoyed this time off, yet he couldn't. For one, Gary didn't want to worry his mother, so he had to keep up the ruse that everything was fine by leaving for school. However, even if that hadn't been the case, the high schooler had far too much on his agenda to be sitting around watching TV. There was still so much for him to figure out about the werewolf system. Barry's mark might be gone, but there was still the one he had left on Gil just 2 days ago. Judging by the direction of both remaining marks, it appeared as if he and Tom had already headed to school today. Then there was still the rampant Omega Wolf on the loose, but with the police looking for him, he would have a hard time finding him. After yesterday's run-in, with the police going after Billy was even riskier. He had been stabbed by the deceased bully, so his blood had been left all over the scene. If they hadn't been looking for him before, they would surely do so now that Barry had died. The high schooler was lucky that he had no criminal record, so they didn't have his DNA on file. However, if he ever did get taken in as a suspect, it would be easy enough to match up his DNA with the other two events. If he became a criminal, he could help no one. The better option was to look out for Inu and just wait for Billy. Not really knowing much about him, though all he could do was hope he texted him if he got in trouble. For the first time this week, Gary was making his way to the gym. The last 2 days he had been unable to go there. Monday, he had encountered the Altered Hunter, and yesterday, he had been stabbed. He was also eager to test how his extra strength translated in terms of power. Gary noticed the questioning looks he received from the other gym goers. They seemed to wonder why a high schooler was there this early in the morning. Some thought he was skipping school. Others gave him the benefit of the doubt and assumed his school started late. Yet in the end, nobody came over to bother him. All of them seemed to agree that it was better for Gary to be here than to roam the streets. The high schooler proceeded to follow the system's instructions while reminding himself what he had learned today. I know now that I can gain additional stat points for successfully hunting a mark even when it isn't the full moon. I only got a single point, but I would have gotten more if I had eaten him as well. I have no idea whether Billy also has a system or not, but if he gets stronger the same way I do, then he must have gotten a lot stronger after eating his victims. There's a good chance that he'll be as strong, if not more so than me, under Charging Heart. I have to find a way to close that gap by playing with my system. Daily quest complete. 5 EXP received. 390 of 460 EXP. Receiving the notification after his last rep, Gary took a quick shower before heading to a nearby park. It wasn't the same one Inu had called him to, but this one was closer to their apartment, and most importantly, it contained a forest inside. Gary was completely broke after giving his mother his emergency fund, though he would do it again in a heartbeat if it meant that they wouldn't have to move away. I just hope that winning that tag team match will pay off as well as the fight against Billy. Until then, I have to make sure I don't go crazy from this continuous loss of energy. Whether I like it or not, I'll have to go feral on some animals. His second daily quest required him to consume 2 kilograms of meat a day. Thanks to yesterday's unexpected meal, Gary now knew for a fact that the system didn't care about where it came from or how processed it was. In fact, he even started to suspect that it had been goading him towards going out to hunt all along. The thought of eating forest animals was still somewhat gross to the high schooler, but it was far better than the alternative. It also had the benefit of keeping down his bloodlust, so he wouldn't try going for something bigger. He was here today since rats weren't exactly on the top of his to-eat pile, even if they hadn't tasted that bad. It didn't take long for Gary to find a squirrel running across the forest ground. His first attempt to get to it failed completely. Not used to this sort of thing, he stepped on a branch, alarming the critter. Seeing that his stealth approach had failed, he immediately sprinted towards it, but the small creature was faster and closer to a tree, which it promptly climbed. Climbing a tree would have probably been impossible for the old Gary in the past, but thanks to his stats, it was easy enough. Unfortunately, this hadn't made him an expert tree climber overnight. The teenager had followed after his prey, yet by the time he had climbed to where the squirrel had been, it had already leapt to a nearby tree. Gary didn't want to give up yet. He had memorized the scent of the squirrel and had waited for it to get down again. After widening the distance between the two, the squirrel was on the ground, foraging for food. This time, he made sure not to alarm it, but alas, when he tried to snatch it at the last second, the squirrel had somehow sensed him and had hopped onto Gary's arm, jumping onto his shoulder and leaping to a nearby tree for safety. That was the second time he had failed. Unsure what he could do better, Gary decided to try his luck with another animal. In the forest, there were several pigeons that would stay on top of the branches, while others on the ground. Regardless, the same thing would happen to the pigeons on the ground. The second Gary got close, his feet would cause the leaves to rustle, scaring them away. He knew he had to decide on a different approach. This time, Gary decided to climb up high in one of the trees. He looked for a strong branch and started to walk along it, and stayed there. All of the birds that were on the tree he was currently at had already left the same one nearby. That was when he decided to patiently wait until the pigeons had gathered on the trees not too far away. Damn, so I really have to act like one of those animals who are hunting out in those shows, huh? Gary thought. He crept slowly along the tree branch. It started to bend slightly under his weight, which was making him worry. Still, he kept his eyes on the one pigeon that looked at him, moving backwards and forwards with its large head. Just stay still, you stupid bird. Gary cursed in his head. That's when he could see that the bird was starting to move. No, I waited too long for this to fail. Skill activated, charging heart. All stats have temporarily been doubled. Dash 10 energy. With all of his stats doubled, he rushed and leapt through the air. The birds scattered, flying from the other tree branch. At this moment, Gary was fearless, and he just wanted to catch one of these damned flying rats after trying for so long. He reached out his hand for the bird, but it seemed that it was already out of reach. Something inside of him was telling him that there was a way. Images he had seen while researching about werewolves came to their mind, about their large claw-like hands. Skill activated claw drain. Dash 15 energy. His fingers started to extend slightly, and his nails grew and sharpened. With it growing slightly larger, Gary managed to cut the pigeon's belly, his fingers slicing through it easily, and it tumbled to the ground with the leaves on the floor. Oh, that hurt a bit, Gary thought, but at the same time he had done it. Was I imagining things? Gary thought, looking at his hand, that it seemed to have gone back to its normal self, but he was sure of it. Well, I suppose I should have figured that a skill called Claw Drain would do something like this, but would it have killed you to maybe mention it in the skill description? You stupid system. Thank God, I didn't try it out in the middle of a fight. I can't exactly be using this in public like charging heart. Now, can I? Gary directed his anger towards the system. There was another problem. Although he had finally managed to kill a pigeon, he had been forced to use both his skills to do it. If even a rat had only been good enough to replenish around 10 energy points, he doubted the pigeon would be much better. I guess, until I get faster, it's back to the rats for me. Will it help if I use some condiments, or will that just make matters worse? It was then that the phone in Gary's pocket started to vibrate. He grabbed the phone in his pocket and saw that it was a secret one. To his surprise, the sender wasn't Kai this time, and even more baffling was the content of the message. I found him. After receiving the text, Gary immediately asked for more information. He needed to know whether Inu had actually run into or simply found Billy. Unfortunately, he didn't get any answers. He wasn't even left to read, making the high schooler start to worry. Not knowing anything about his fellow gang member, Gary texted the only person who would be able to know anything about it, Kai. When he asked his upperclassmen where Inu would be right now, the answer was so obvious that Gary was ready to facepalm himself. As if anticipating the follow-up question Gary was about to type, he received the location of Inu's school. Gary munched down on the pigeon and was surprised to see a notification about him regaining 10 points of energy. Running through the forest with the help of Charging Heart, he was able to grab an unsuspecting squirrel. Before the critter even had the chance to struggle, the high schooler squeezed tightly. A few moments later, Gary had gained the knowledge that a squirrel helped him regain around 6 points of energy. 83/110 energy. Gary would have loved to regain even more energy, but he couldn't waste any more time. He knew that this one squirrel was just a fluke and that he couldn't gamble on being so lucky again. As such, Gary made use of Charging Heart's duration to get to Inu's school faster. He wasn't sure if he could afford to use the skill again, since he would need as much energy as possible to fight Billy. Yet at the same time, if he was late, the Omega Wolf might escape. This is it. I'm really going to face Billy. I thought I would be more scared meeting him, but for some reason all I feel is excitement. Gary thought as the Charging Heart skill had run out, and he used it once more. 73/110 energy. Meanwhile, in the middle of class, The reason for Inu not answering wasn't because he had been attacked by Billy. It also wasn't a case of the high schooler ignoring him. No, it was something far more mundane. His teacher had caught him using his phone in the middle of the lesson, so he had confiscated it. The teacher didn't care that Inu, like many other students of his class, weren't actually paying any attention to his math lesson, yet he had a zero-tolerance policy regarding phones. It was one of the many schools in the area that students who were sent to were deemed as a lost hope. I did what I was asked. I sent him a text so he can't go nagging me. But he's really here, huh? Looks like Kai is right. He is after me. But why did he seem so different? Ina wondered. This morning, on his way to school, the high schooler had noticed a large figure by the gate for a brief second, but by the time he had turned around there had been nobody there. The students around hadn't cared too much, but Inu had found it strange since the figure hadn't been walking into or out of school, just standing there on the pavement staring ahead. It had been too short of a time frame, but Inu could have sworn that underneath the hood had been none other than Billy. What's more, that guy seemed to have had a creepy smile on his face. What's your game, Billy? After your last stunt, do you want to try to scare me by showing me that you know what school I go to? Or are you going to jump me after? Whatever you bring, I'll take you on. Since Gary's white school shirt had gotten bloody yesterday, he currently wasn't wearing his school uniform. There was of course his blazer, but he hardly ever wore that. In the first place, going near other schools and wearing blazers was a sign for trouble. A lot of the schools were influenced by the gangs in the area, and eventually even the bad kids in school had started to imitate them, believing that belonging to one school was like belonging to a gang. The good thing was that it had practically become second nature for Gary to travel with his trusted hoodie. This time he had opted for one that was even darker in color than his usual one. Since this time, he knew what was planning to go hunting. It didn't take long for Gary to reach Inu's school, and his immediate opinion of it was that it looked more of a dump than his place. This must be one of the schools Mom kept warning us about, the one we would end up in if we didn't study. Gary thought as he walked right in. There wasn't even a teacher there to stop him. The only one out on the field appeared to be a janitor, yet he didn't say anything as the high schooler walked past him. *T, Ina must still be in class. Kai only sent me the school address, but not what class he would be in. Seems like he doesn't know either. Well, I don't hear any noise, so that should at least mean that Billy still hasn't done anything outrageous so far. Gary tried to sniff the air, hoping he would be able to catch some type of foreign scent, but since he was in a school, the area was riddled with unknown scents. It was impossible for him to isolate Billy in particular like that. If I knew I would ever have to hunt him down, I would have tried to memorize his stupid scent. He is a frigging werewolf like me now, so why can't I get some help by the system? Looks like I have no choice but to rely on my eyes instead. Gary thought. Seeing that the teachers didn't care, Gary easily entered the school without much worry. While walking past the other classrooms, he could see just how out of hand the school actually was. Seeing this, he started to think back to his mother, how much she had pushed for him and Amy to go to good school in SLU. Although, more so for Amy's sake, he understood. If Amy went to a school like this, then Gary would probably be getting into fights every day. Eventually, he had reached his destination, the school roof. He quickly ran up to the fence on the edge, looking down to try and spot anything that looked to be out of place. "Who are you? I haven't seen you before," a voice said from behind. Turning around, Gary could see a smoking student. The guy looked to be slightly older than him, and for some reason, he was sprouting a pompadour, a hairstyle which was clearly out of fashion, yet he was quite well built for his age. What the hell is it with high schoolers these days? Has someone been handing out steroid-infused candies, and I was just absent that day? Gary thought, as he continued to survey the area. I'm just trying to find someone. Once I do, I'll be out of your hair. Gary replied, Well, it's clear you're not from around here. Otherwise, you would have known that this is my spot. The guy shouted, and Gary suddenly felt a strong blow to his side. -8 HP. Did that guy just hit me? What is wrong with him? This is my place, bitch. The guy cursed at Gary, yet the werewolf was in no mood for games. This person was not the one he needed to face. At that moment, something happened that hadn't happened in a long time. From anger, Gary's heart rate was rising, so much so that it had crossed the 150 BPM mark without the need for him to use his skill charging heart. Meanwhile, In class, the bell was soon to ring for lunch. When lifting his head, yawning and stretching, Inu could see someone out from the window in the hallway. It was the same large hooded figure. What the F***CK is he doing in school dash? Before Inu could finish his sentence, Billy came charging in, throwing his fist right at the class window. Like in a movie, he smashed through it with a single hit. Shards flew out everywhere, and the students covered their faces while the sound of screaming echoed. "Ha!" Inu smiled, wiping off some blood from his forehead as a piece of glass had managed to scratch him. "Bring it on." Perhaps if Gary had been paying more attention, he would have never allowed the other student to get a hit in that easily. The most surprising thing to Gary was how much it had hurt. Endurance had always been his strongest stat, and it had increased twice during his recent fights. On top of that, he had the power of the moon helping him. Yet that one strike had taken off nearly as much health as Barry's brick attack. "I'm surprised someone like you is still standing after hitting the side like that." The boy scoffed at Gary. "I knew you had to be someone special to just walk into our school like that." The high schooler got ready to show that arrogant guy the real meaning of pain, but just in a moment, both of them heard screams coming from inside the school. Concentrating on his hearing, Gary located where it had come from. For a second, the student was distracted by the screams, and when he turned back around to look at the foreign student in front of him, he could see Gary running his way. "Get out of my way." Austin was a student who was classified as the top dog at his school. He had been fearless when he had come here, facing every person who was willing to challenge him to a fight. But then there was an incident with a certain transfer student. Something had told him that if he was going to have a fight with that said person, that it would be too dangerous. And now, for the second time in his life, wishing for a short time frame, he had the same feeling when looking towards Gary. "This is impossible." Austin threw out a punch, aiming to hit Gary right in the face. Inside the classroom, some of the students had decided to make a run for it via the doors after Billy had come through the window, while the others remained in class, but now stood towards the back of the classroom. Even the damn teacher ran off, not that I can blame them. Did this guy get another growth spurt since the last time I saw him? Ina wondered. Billy certainly had grown in size. He had always been large for his age, but even his 4XL size clothes didn't seem to be fitting him as parts of his belly were staking out through his shirt and more. "What is this pig doing in our class?" One of the students yelled. He was part of this class delinquent trio. Ever since he had transferred here from Eaton High, he had laid low. There was no reason for him to waste time fighting against a bunch of delinquents, wannabe gangsters. For him, they just weren't on his level. However, the reason they didn't cause Inu any trouble was because of one guy, Austin Foster. That guy had taken reign over the whole school. The two of them had only ever met once. They had stared at each other, but eventually Inu had just shrugged and gone past him. Austin was the only person that Inu suspected had some type of fighting skill, but challenging and potentially winning against him sounded like too much of a hassle. He had no desire to run this school, not after being betrayed by his friends in Eaton High. If only my tag team partner in the match was someone like him, we might actually place highly in that tournament. Someone like him has the aura of a real leader. No idea what Kai sees in that green fawn guy. While thinking these things, Inu witnessed the trio go in for an attack against Billy. The other students watching were smirking, excited that they were about to witness a good beating, thinking that the pig deserved it after scaring them like this. However, before the first student could hit him, Billy grabbed onto the incoming fist. With his free hand, the oversized intruder punched his attacker's forearm, and a devastating crack resounded throughout the classroom, followed by a blood-chilling scream. It looked so effortless, but it was obvious to everyone that the student's bones had broken. The other two, who were now close to Billy, had successfully landed a punch each, but they were unable to reach his head since Billy was too big. They had aimed for his stomach instead, expecting to hit rolls of fat. Instead, it felt like they had just hit a massive rock, their knuckles almost bleeding while their fingers had bent into unnatural directions. Before they could do anything else, both of their heads had been grabbed by Billy. He lifted them off the ground and threw them on the floor, causing their bodies to almost bounce like rag dolls. The students started to scream after seeing this, fearing for their lives, the students who thought day by day were taking out like that and in such a manner. One of the students, seeing the door to the right, try to make a break for it. He was a shorter boy who had been holding his girlfriend's hand until a second ago. He had forgotten everything about their relationship and had even pushed her to the side. If I try to take her with me, it will just slow me down, the student thought instinctively. However, just as some students feared, Billy wasn't going to let just anyone leave the room and immediately blocked the only door. Standing in front of the student, he soon kicked him in the stomach, sending him to the floor and making him skid across it until he landed in the shards of broken glass. What the F***CK is going on? Since when was that blob of fat this fast? What the hell did he take to not only grow bigger, stronger, but also faster? Inu's previous confidence started to dwindle, but he still needed to do something, aware that Billy was after him primarily. The first thing Inu did was kick the top of a desk that was in front of him, sliding it across to Billy. The top of the wood part hit the other's knees, causing him to flinch slightly. The fighter wasted no time. He had followed straight behind the table and jumped on top of it. Then, using the momentum from running in, he followed up with a knee strike. All the students had to rub their eyes to make sure they weren't dreaming. This kind of performance usually only happened in a movie, yet Inu had done it in one smooth motion. Their classmate's knee connected with Billy's face, and the force caused the other's head to fall back a bit, but only a few inches. Billy smiled and swung his arm out, punching Inu from the side, sending him rolling onto the floor. Inu quickly got up, but his hands immediately went to his ribs. It feels like they're broken. **T. I should have listened to Kai. Unfortunately, his regrets came far too late. Even if he could call for help, how long would it take for them to arrive? Then there was also the question if they actually could do anything to help, or if his gang members coming here would just doom them all. Billy spewed out a few teeth and some blood. His nose was also bleeding, yet it didn't look to be broken. As the blood ran down his face, he licked his lips, tasting it. He didn't look to be hurt at all. With the table in front of him, he lifted it with both hands, and there was a great big smile on his face. He walked towards Inu, ready to flatten him with such a thing. If he hits him with that, he's going to kill him. One of the students pointed out, too scared to do anything about it. Quick, throw whatever you have. Another suggested. The students started to grab their chairs and hurled it towards Billy. They then grabbed their bags, books, whatever they could find in the classroom, but even though he was a hard target to miss, it didn't seem to be doing much. His eyes didn't leave Inu for even a second. Despite their good intentions, nobody seemed to have realized that throwing things actually made it impossible for Inu to flee, else he would risk getting caught by something. Unlike Billy, he didn't feel confident in being able to ignore those makeshift projectiles. Guys, stop. You're just making it worse. Inu tried to shout out, but the students had fallen into a panic, and none of them had registered what he meant. Being the only thing they could do, the frightened teenagers continued throwing stuff, until someone had entered the classroom and immediately started to run towards Billy. A chair came flying his way, but he knocked it out of the way, only to be hit by a book, yet he continued to run. Who is that crazy person? Inu wondered. Shortly after, there was another student who had entered behind him, but seeing the condition of the room, he stopped. The table was in mid-swing. Inu tried to move, but the pain from his broken ribs was slowing him down. He knew he would be a fraction too late. That's when he noticed the student who was running in wasn't going for Billy, but instead ran past him and had pushed Inu to the side. He himself rolled across the floor, causing the table to hit the ground and break on impact from the powerful blow. The table had only missed him by a few seconds. "What are you doing? You could have been hit by that thing and died." Inu complained to his savior. "That bastard is after me, so stay out of it." "Yeah, that won't work. He's after me too," the hooded person replied. It took a second for Inu to realize that the hooded person was Gary, until he saw his green hair from the hood. Although he did text him like he requested, he didn't think that his supposed gang leader would be so desperate to find such a person that he had come all the way to his school. For that matter, he didn't exactly recall telling Gary what school he went to. Wait, does he think he can take on this guy? He wasn't here when Billy came in and wreaked havoc. "Hey, don't be an idiot." Inu warned the other. "I know you might have defeated this guy before, but he's clearly not the same. You can't beat him." Naturally, Gary could see that Billy had clearly changed. Even a growth spurt wouldn't explain his sudden increase over such a short period of time. What's more, he could feel a new type of pressure exuding from the large fellow. His system also finally confirmed something he had been wondering for the longest time now. You have finally met with the other Omega Wolf. Well, thank God. He isn't actually a werewolf, and he's just like me. Gary thought, I want to thank you for what you did to me. Billy spoke up suddenly. No one really knew who this was directed at, apart from Gary, of course, but soon after he turned around, as if he was looking for a way out. No, you don't. A voice announced. You don't get to just come into my school and mess with everyone this badly. The person who was now standing behind him was Austin, who had followed after Gary, and he immediately went to throw an uppercut towards the intruder's stomach. It was a big hit, and unlike the delinquent trio, Austin's hand wasn't hurt. The school's top dog had a feeling guy that Big wouldn't have gone down with just one hit and followed up with a punch to the side. Just like the others, he was surprised by Billy's nimbleness, as the other turned around facing and grabbed onto both of Austin's hands. You're strong. Stronger than anyone else I fought before, so maybe you deserve this, Billy said, as he opened his mouth wide, revealing a particular set of sharp teeth. Vampire! Someone screamed. Is he going to eat him? Ina wondered. At this point, he felt like nothing would surprise him when it concerned Billy. He had seen people bite others before, but only when they were in a desperate situation. Greenfang's debut fight would be an example, though Gary had seemingly done that more, because he lost control. This was the first time Ina watched someone open their mouth this widely. While everyone was frozen in place, doing nothing, only the hooded figure moved, and to the shock of everyone, he dived right into the situation. Damn it! If only I didn't get hit so bad. With the three of us together, we might have been able to do something. Inu cursed his injury. He could only watch and pray that Gary actually knew what he was doing, but then the strangest reaction occurred. His gang leader didn't go in for a punch or for a hit. Instead, he got right in between Austin and Billy and shoved his forearm into the other's open mouth. Oh, no, you don't. It's bad enough with just one of you, Gary shouted out as he tried to push forward with his forearm. Billy's jaw was strong and his teeth had already sunken in. Blood was dripping down his arm. They couldn't understand why a student would allow himself to get bitten instead of someone else, especially since the hooded person didn't seem to be from their school. Is this why? Is his reckless will to sacrifice the reason Kai wanted him as the leader? Ina started to wonder. He started to feel horrible. He was letting his injured side stop him from fighting as an excuse, while this guy who hardly knew anything about fighting at all had just shoved his arm into Billy's mouth. It was then that both Austin and Inu picked up chairs from the classroom and slammed it down the intruder's back at the same time. Alas, Billy still didn't let go. Yuck. Gary screamed. He tried to push back, but Billy's jaw strength alone turned out to be far above his own. You bite me, I'm going to bite down on you. Gary opened his own mouth, ready to bite back, yet Billy decided to let go at that moment. He then turned around for a few seconds and jumped through the broken window. For some reason, Billy was now in the middle of running away, and Gary was left there with his arm bleeding. Hey, man, you took that bite from me. Are you all right? Austin asked, checking up on him. However, for the second time, Gary had almost completely ignored him and decided to run after Billy himself, jumping through the window. You're going to chase him in your condition? Just leave it, Inu shouted, yet Gary was already running through the halls. I can't leave it. Just then, Billy tried to bite down on that strange guy met on the roof. I might be overthinking it, but it didn't seem like he planned to eat him. In that case, he must have wanted to do the same thing that I did to him. He wanted to turn him. I can't allow him to start his own pack. Gary could see Billy up ahead, but despite his large size, he was fast. Gary had already activated Charging Heart when the other had bitten down on him, yet despite his boost, his legs still couldn't keep up. System, use Force Bond on him, so I'll be able to track him down. Error. Your mark skill only works on human targets. Unless piece of crap, Gary wanted to yell out, and it was then he saw Billy not slowing, jumping and bracing himself as he crashed out of the window. Gary soon caught up and looked out, only to glimpse at how Billy had already left the school ground. They were on the third floor, and Gary wasn't quite sure if he could survive that and how he would catch up with Billy in the first place. Crap, Gary thought. The sound of the police sirens from cars could be heard from a distance. He took that as his K to get out of the school. It was already bad enough that he had to intervene and reveal himself, but he couldn't allow himself to become a witness. Heck, he couldn't even explain any of it anyway. While running, he texted Inu before he left. If they ask, you don't know me, Gary was left a little beaten over what to do. Just as he had expected, Billy was the other Omega Wolf. He was faster, stronger, and better than fighting at him. On top of that, he wasn't worried about killing or hurting people. So much for the system giving me some sort of edge. How the hell am I supposed to beat him? I need help. The police arrived at the scene and quickly went to work. The teaching faculty provided them with a classroom so that they could start taking the students' testimonies about the events that had occurred. Although none of them had outright been able to tell that it had been Billy Brunton, the police were confident that it was him based on the few details they had received. The only thing they couldn't really figure out was who this hooded stranger was that had arrived and apparently saved both Inu and Austin. You should have seen his entrance. It was right out of a movie. He came running in, pushed Inu out of the way, and rolled to safety like a millisecond before that monster slammed the table down. He was like a hero who came at just the right moment. I swear if he had been a moment later, Inu would have ended up as a pancake. One of the students reported in excitement. That guy's crazy, I tell you. I mean, seriously, who would shove their own hand into the mouth of such a monster? That fat bastard was even worse. It looked like he planned to eat the smaller guy. Blood was spilling everywhere, just like in a splatter. We tried helping, everyone did, but we didn't want to get close after we saw what he did. Another student told his version of things that had happened. The two police officers that were talking with the students were none other than Chief of Police Anton Milston, as well as his younger male assistant Rugame. As crazy as it sounded, by now both men had accepted that the students weren't pulling their legs. The students had been called in one after the other, and unless they all had collectively decided on a story beforehand, their testimonies matched, though some seemed more exaggerated than others. Initially, they had been far more skeptical. The first person they had interviewed had been Inu, as he had been the one who had fought Billy the longest and also been the one closest to their target. They had hoped that he might be able to tell him why their suspected killer might have so publicly attacked their class in the first place, or at least who that other mysterious person was. Unfortunately for them, Inu had retrieved his phone from the broken table, read Gary's message, and just to be safe also deleted it afterwards. As such, he had pretended to not know either one of them. The two police officers had noticed his slight change in attitude when asked about Gary, but without any further evidence linking the two, they had let him go, questioning the rest of his class. The last person on their list was Austin Foster, since he was a student from a different class, yet he had entered after Gary. The high schooler entered the room with his hands in his pocket, as calm as ever, and the questioning had begun. They asked whether he knew Billy or had at least seen him before. Austin just shrugged, telling them that his face seemed familiar and that he might have seen him in passing somewhere. When they held up Billy's picture, Austin gasped in surprise. That's him. Only the dude was like a head bigger. Who is he? Austin asked genuinely. By this point, the two officers weren't surprised anymore. Barely any of the students had recognized him, but they couldn't fault them just because none of them had bothered to read or watch the news, making them clueless that they had a run-in with a suspected killer. Like the others, Rue just told Austin that he was a suspect in another case, without going into further details. Your fellow students reported that they saw you come in shortly after the hooded guy. Do you know him? If not, could you at least make out what he looked like? Rue asked. Austin sat there for a while, making it seem like he was trying to remember something. The truth was he had seen what Gary looked like after punching him, quite clearly at that. If he were to tell them about the other's hair color, it would most likely help them immensely. Yet he didn't. Nah, I've never seen him before today. He answered truthfully. That guy came out of nowhere, so I started chasing him thinking he was an intruder in our school. He wore a hood, but it was a no brand, so all I can say is that it was dark. Then I saw that Billy guy, so my attention was more on that giant pig bastard than someone who helped me. He was gone before I could even thank him. After a few more questions were asked, Austin was free to go, but Anton didn't feel like he had made much progress at all until he received a text from his phone. They match. Anton murmured. What matches, sir? Rue asked. The blood in that classroom from our mysterious stranger is the same as the blood from the guy who attacked that deceased high schooler and the one that was found at the construction site. They all match. I don't know how yet, but he seems to be also connected to this Brunton case. Anton looked to be over the moon, almost jumping out from his seat as he spoke. I knew that these cases had to be linked, but what is going on? According to the students, he came up, saved some strangers, and went to chase after the killer. Anton thought back to what he had seen in the alleyway. Could it be that the killer was actually this mysterious person they were chasing after, and Billy was just trying to find out the truth? No, that didn't seem right to Anton either, especially given that Brunton had undoubtedly been the aggressor. In all the cases involving Billy, his blood hadn't been found at the scene. In all the other situations involving the stranger, the circumstances just seemed more life-threatening, as if they were fighting for their life. It was hard to make out the full picture without all puzzle pieces, but at least there seemed to be a connection. Catching one of them might allow them to catch the other. A little down the hallway, Inu was waiting for Austin to get out. "Did you say anything?" Inu asked in a quiet tone after making sure that nobody was around. "I'm no snitch." Since he was running away from them, I'm sure he had his reasons. Austin shrugged it off and continued to walk down the hall. "Thanks," Inu called out. "I didn't do it for you." Austin replied, "I did it because that guy saved me from getting bitten." He took a few steps, stopped, and turned around. "Hey, he's your friend, right?" "Who is he?" "Why, you want to thank him in person?" Inu asked cautiously. "Nah, he was just—" Austin thought back to the roof. When he threw his punch out, Gary suddenly did a strange spin, avoiding the hit. It seemed slow, but the timing was perfect. Austin had been ready to try to kick him, but he could see in that moment that Gary wasn't aiming at him, his gaze at something else entirely. He stopped his leg and saw a punch come out from Gary himself, which slammed into the metal door behind them. The door hinge snapped right open, and the green-haired boy continued running on forward, fixing his hood. Austin wasn't sure what to make of it, choosing to believe that Gary was just trying to run away, but when he looked at the metal door, it had dented slightly. That wasn't a strength of an ordinary person, and he shuddered to think what would have happened if he had fought him seriously. He was just really strong. Austin finished his sentence. This came as a surprise to Inu. Although Gary had undoubtedly saved both of them, he hadn't exactly fared that much better against Billy. If anything, Inu would have used brave if he wanted to compliment Gary, though it was bordering idiotic and suicidal. Nevertheless, it was obvious that their school's official top dog was interested in him. Did something happen between those two, or something? Inu wondered, especially since they had both entered around the same time. "You don't have to tell me, just if he ever needs some backup, let me know," Austin requested, continuing his walk back to his classroom. It was then that Inu realized that he had already accepted Gary for who he was. If he hadn't come today, what would have happened to him? So if someone asked him who he was to him, he shouldn't shy away and tell the truth. "Hey," Inu called out. "About your question, that guy is my leader." The basement was a popular nightclub in Slew's Town Center, yet today its front door had a sign that read closed. However, the guards around it were telltale signs that something was going on inside. Unbeknownst to the normal populace, the club was merely a front for the underdogs, one of the town's most successful gangs. What's more, the basement wasn't the only shop that would remain closed that day. Damien Hawk had used his influence to make all the shops within that block treat today as a sort of impromptu holiday, so that nobody would disturb their special meeting. Inside one of the VIP rooms, Damien had been sitting calmly, talking to another on the other end. It looked like the conversation was about to come to an end. The other party stood up to leave, not even bowing, but stopped just before leaving. "I thought the underdogs were meant to be the best in Slew, which was why I hired you. Believe me when I say that package is important for the both of us. Get it back, or it could be the both of us on the chopping block." The man said, leaving. Damien continued to sit there in his seat. He did so until the people were escorted out and when a certain amount of time had passed. He picked up the large wine bottle in front of him and threw it against the wall, smashing it to pieces. "It's been over a week. How is it possible for you to not have so much as a single clue about that damn traitor's whereabouts?" The leader shouted at his subordinate, who was in the unfortunate situation of having only bad news to report. The ringing in his eardrums was the least of his worries, as he braced himself for what's coming next. He had known his boss long enough to anticipate the large fist that hit him across the face, sending him flying down to the dance room floor. Damien wiped his hand with a little cloth he had in his suit pocket and started to walk down the stairs to the injured man. "Do I need to remind you just how important that package is?" Damien asked. The man was in pain. Touching his face, he felt an imprint left from one of his boss's rings. His cheek was bleeding, but he knew that unless he replied immediately, the underdog's leader would just continue beating him up. "No, sir. I understand it perfectly, sir. The problem is that everything that boy has told us was fake. Right now, the color gangs are causing chaos in our territories, so it's hard for us to gather any reliable information on him, especially since we only have his hair color to go on. There are so many punks that dye their hair green, and he might have even dyed it by now. The red color gang in particular has been getting more and more brazen, challenging us from multiple areas." The man answered truthfully, yet was frightened that he would soon feel another hit on his face. Instead, Damien squatted, grabbed the man by his hair, and pulled him up to his eye level. "How long have you been in this gang?" Damien asked. "Around 1 year, sir. I got recognized for my work and got promoted to the Pitbull unit." He replied quickly. "A hard worker, eh? I can respect that. Fine, I shall let you off with this much. You better show me results, or I'll make it so that you will fit in that package. We still have to deliver that F***king thing to one of the kings. You know who they are, right?" Damien asked, his hand not letting go of the poor man. The gangster nodded instantly, even though nodding caused his hair to hurt even more. The kings were a colloquial term for the top gang leader of their county. They were a term used for those who controlled a Tier 1 city, making them the richest and most influential men in the world. If one of these kings asked one of the lower cities for a favor, the other party was unable to refuse, no matter how ridiculous that favor might be. Still, it wasn't all bad. As they say, noblesse oblige, making such a thing high risk, high reward, and Damien had no desire to take the fall for this. The reason the Red Color Gang are kicking up a fuss is because another king must have ordered them to intercept the package. They don't seem to know that we don't have it anymore, so they're trying to get rid of us. Damien shouted in anger and stood up so quickly that he ripped off a good number of strands of hair from the guy before heading back upstairs. "We're lucky that it's just the Red Color Gang for the time being. Unless we can give that king what he wants and earn his protection, soon the rest of the gangs might attack us to get that package." All those that were in the club room wanted to take a step back for fear that Daimon would take out his anger on him next, but they knew that if they did move, they were more likely to be picked. "Kirk," Damien called out. Hearing his name, Kirk stepped out, wearing his normal red flashy suit. "Your schedule has been cleared for the rest of the month. As you can tell, everyone else is pretty much useless. I want you to do me a little factor. Let's remind Slew why you're my right-hand man and why the underdogs shouldn't be messed with. Get rid of the Red Color Gang for me, and while you do, find out who is backing them. Now that the Cheetah Squad will be dealing with the Color Gang, I expect results and not excuses by the end of the week. Find that damn greenie," Damien shouted. It had already been an eventful day for Gary, but there were still many things he needed to do even after facing Billy. First things first, it was time to regain some energy. To do that, the high schooler visited his new favorite alleyway. The number of rats didn't seem to have reduced, something he was actually thankful for. His natural speed was slow, making it hard to catch the critter. Fortunately, charging hard allowed him to turn the tables. He could also catch several of them at a time before the effect wore off, making him earn a net plus. Gary continued even after his energy had completely filled up, only stopping once he got a notification. Daily quest complete. 5 EXP received. 395 of 460 EXP. I didn't get anything for risking my life fighting Billy. I need to figure out how to beat him somehow. Gary thought as he made his way to school to not be late for rugby practice. On the way, he received a text from Inu, who was informing him that Billy might have broken his ribs, so their training would have to be put on hold for a while. He also informed him that he would go to Kai to sort something out. Gary had actually been looking forward to their training, hoping Inu might be able to teach him a few things. The fighter had been his best shot at gaining some sort of edge over the Omega Wolf. Unfortunately, it seemed as if they would have to wait for Inu to get better first. Gary texted back another time then. The only question was, how much more time did they exactly have if Billy even attacked his targets out in the open now? At school, Gary did his usual practice. At the start of the practice, Mr. Root went on to mention an important message to them all. I know the school has already had its silence and given their blessings, but Barry was an important part of our team and loved rugby. So if there's anything we could do for him, it would be to win this upcoming game. The students found it a bit awkward that it seemed like Mr. Root was trying to encourage them through a death, but the kids weren't really that affected by it. To them, it just felt like Barry had moved or something. It was hard to process a death like that. Still, there was a certain person who was affected and had returned to the field. Gil. The only thing was, Gil didn't look to be exactly the same as he once was before. He had dark bags under his eyes. There was also good news. Tom was sitting over by the bench watching the game with his typical attitude of not caring in the slightest about it. Seeing this, Gary lifted his arm up after a good 20 minutes of practice and requested he have a break. Mr. Root, seeing that unlike yesterday Gary was playing well, actually agreed to this. He was far more concerned with Gary getting an injury at this point. Hey, so you look a lot better, Gary said, sitting down on the bench next to him. Yeah, I'm all fine now. I think they might have even straightened my teeth even better, Tom said, delivering a smile. Fortunately, it didn't make me too handsome to hang out with you. Both Tom and Gary laughed for a few seconds, but then there was this awkward silence between the two of them. It was like they had forgotten how to interact with each other. The truth was, Tom wanted to ask Gary something, but was too afraid of the answer. He had heard of Barry's death, and there was something telling him that Gary might have had something to do with it. Of course, it wasn't like he could outright ask him. If he wasn't, then Tom would have just insinuated that his friend might have killed someone in cold blood. And if he was, well, then Tom felt like he was also partially responsible for it. If he had confessed to their bullying before it had gotten out of hand, things might have ended very differently. Neither option had a happy ending, so instead Tom decided to ask something else. I can see that there's something on your mind. I just want you to know that you don't have to worry about me anymore. Whatever happened to Barry, it looks like Gil is feeling too down to be targeting me anymore. Gary would normally be very elated about Gil no longer bothering his best friend, but Tom was right. His mind was elsewhere, and it wasn't focused on Barry or his involvement in the bully's death. He had gotten over that far quicker than he believed to be normal, suspecting either his system or his new existence to have some role in that. But right now, all he could think about was Billy. Tom, I have to tell you something, Gary began. No, I was pretty sure there was another one like me out there. I mean another, you know what? Gary finally admitted. This was news to Tom. Out of all the things he had expected Gary to say, this wasn't one of them. He was at a serious loss for words. I could kind of feel it. It's like the two of us seemed to be fighting over who should be the leader, the alpha like you said, and today, I ran into him. You ran into another one of your kind? Was he older than you? Was he always a werewolf like you? What did the two of you speak about? Tom suddenly bombarded his best friend with a barrage of questions. However, Gary just shook his head. Looking into his eyes, Tom could tell he was concerned about this, almost frightened. That guy wasn't like me. He didn't exactly invite me over for tea and biscuits to talk. No, I found him in the midst of attacking innocent people, hurting others, so I tried to stop him. It was strange. It felt like he was stronger than me, but for some reason, he ran away from me. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I can't wrap my head around it. I was hoping you might have an answer. Tom thought about it for a while. He had actually done the research in that regard before spoon-feeding it to Gary, who had tuned out after the first bit. In the end, there was only one thing he could think of. I'm not sure. I only know as much about werewolves as what we've learned. Maybe he's waiting for the upcoming full moon? I mean, according to lore, that's when you're both meant to transform and be at your strongest. If he's an Omega like you, maybe he wants to fight you at your strongest so he can make you submit fully to him. Tom theorized. For some reason, some part of Gary agreed that this would be the honorable thing to do, because whenever he was thinking about time, Gary was always referring to the full moon. It was almost as if that was the date set for when their match would be held. If so, that would mean Gary had until the full moon to get stronger. It was later that night that the clock passed midnight and the timer moved forward once again. Your bloodlust grows. 5 days until the next full moon. Gary was still excluded, so he missed a very big event in their class. All right, everyone. So today we have a surprise transfer. Honestly, even though we weren't expecting this so much and so soon, but they have their reason. I want you to please welcome your new fellow student. The teacher started the day, allowing the newcomer to say a few words. The door slid open, and a boy walked through, having both his arms and badges as well as his side. Everyone, it's nice to meet you. My name's Inu. Waking up the next morning, Gary was still thinking about what he could do to get stronger. He only had 5 more days left until the full moon, and from what he had discovered, his ways to get stronger were very limited. The high schooler could try and increase his stats naturally in the gym, though there were 2 problems with that approach. For one, his strength and endurance had grown, so he estimated that it would take for them to grow, which was exactly what he lacked. Then there was also the issue of him still not having figured out how exactly he was supposed to increase dexterity. Gary knew that it would be possible with the free stat point he would gain for reaching level 5. He wasn't that far off, yet at the same time he lacked a good source of EXP income. The high schooler could continue completing his daily quests, though those gave him a pittance in terms of EXP, and without any other source it wouldn't even be enough to reach level 5 until the full moon. The only other way he knew how to receive EXP was by fighting opponents. If he was lucky, he might even trigger some sort of quest that would give him even more. Being excluded from school meant that the high schooler couldn't really start challenging the other fighting clubs, leaving him with one remaining choice. Just as he had made up his mind to go out and look for some trouble, he received a text on his special phone. Heads up, the underdogs have ordered the Black Color Gang to retaliate against the Reds' advances into their territory. At the same time, they'll also be scouting the area for you. I know you're excluded, so keep your head low and stay off the streets for a while. Well, that's just great. Gary sighed, looking at the message from Kai that had ruined his plans. Nevertheless, he was very thankful for it. It would be a disaster if he would have ended up in the midst of that. With nothing better to do, Gary opted to complete his normal routine, which included practicing his skills by gathering up his meat candy before going to the gym. As bleak as the day had started, the high schooler left the gym with a satisfied smile on his face. Congratulations! Move, 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 and keep moving. Catch everything and become the wind. Dexterity +1. I guess all that hunting in the forest for squirrels and birds, as well as the sprinting on the treadmill, is really helping me out. Since it's the stat that is the lowest, it should also be the easiest to improve, but it's also the one that I need to work the most in as well. Billy was way faster than I was, Gary thought. After that, there wasn't really much for Gary to do, and before he knew it, with his time spent almost doing nothing, it was time for him to head to rugby practice. After changing, he saw Tom on the bench outside, yet not too far from him was someone he had seen quite recently. Am I imagining things? Gary wondered, rubbing his eyes. Strangely, both of them noticed him at the same time, waving Gary over. Tom and Inu then turned to each other, realizing that they were both calling the same person. Before the practice officially started, Gary quickly ran off, meeting with the other 2. What's going on? Why are you here? Gary asked Inu. How come you already know the transfer student? Tom asked in surprised confusion. As his best friend, he was quite sure that Gary had not once mentioned someone like Inu. Oh, me and Green FA dash. Before Inu could spill the beans that they had met in an underground fighting match, Gary quickly placed his hand over his mouth. He's the brother of one of my Amy's friends. Gary made up on the fly. It's not often, but Amy brings her friends over occasionally, and, well, you know where we live. And they just bring their brother along for some reason. Gary honestly regretted his cover-up story the moment it left his mouth. Everything sounded like a convoluted lie. In hindsight, he should have just said that he had met him at the gym or something. The whole charade told Inu that no one around Gary seemed to know what he was doing. If he's planning to create a gang, then the people around him will naturally get involved. At some point, he'll either have to sever his ties with them or bring them into the gang to protect them. I just hope he's prepared for one of the options. Okay, Tom replied, clearly not convinced. Didn't you introduce yourself as an only child, though? Well, she was my half-sister. You remember what I said about my scumbag dad leaving us? Didn't really feel the need to go into too much detail about family stuff. Inu added some details, going along with the lie. As a new guy, I was just happy to see a familiar face. I mean, look at him. Not like you could forget those green hairs. Anyway, I think you should go out to the field. For what I've been hearing, you're like a minor celebrity now. I've hurt my ribs in an accident recently, so I can't be taking part. Gary was very thankful that Inu had played along, especially since he seemed to have a far easier time with coming up with stuff. While the team started their practice in earnest, Tom and Inu used that time to talk about Gary. The new student learned a lot about Gary, whereas Tom was completely convinced that the other didn't know his best friend at all. For some reason, he felt relieved at the fact that he seemed to be the only one who knew about this entire werewolf situation. During a small break, Gary decided that it would be a good time to talk with Inu, if only to clear up the confusion. He excused himself loudly, claiming that he would take a quick toilet break while meeting Inu's eyes. A few moments after Gary had left, Inu followed after. Of course, the high schooler had waited outside as it felt awkward to talk in that room. "What are you doing here? How did you even manage to transfer this quickly?" Gary asked. "As of today, I'm a student of Westbridge, just like you. I have Kai to thank for that one." Inu grinned. "I told you that I would be talking to him yesterday, remember? He asked me to inform him if anything happened in the whole Billy situation. So I told him everything about yesterday, how he attacked me in school, and how you were there to rescue us. The next moment, he offered to help me transfer over. Apparently, he was going to propose this when we got closer anyway, and this special situation was a perfect excuse to speed up the process. Who is Kai anyway, for him to be able to do this sort of stuff? It's clear that he isn't exactly your average student." That was actually a question Gary would like to have answered as well. All he knew about Kai was that his upperclassmen had money, lots of it, and that he wanted to create a gang to get out of the underdogs, just like him, just didn't know the reason why he wanted to leave. Gary had never asked about the other, despite all the help he had received, but he didn't really care about Kai, since he had a million other problems to solve himself. "Yeah, he does have his connections, that's all I know." Gary shrugged and started running back to the rugby field. Over the next few days, Gary continued to do what he did every day, and each night he would get a countdown of the day to the next full moon drawing closer. There wasn't anything Gary could do about it. There were no signs of Billy, no news of more dead either. Gary started training with Inu after school. Since Inu was still recovering at the moment, he could only instruct Gary on how to fight, and in his spare time, Gary practiced these moves again and again. Then finally, something strange happened with only 2 days left until the next full moon. It was also the day before Gary's rugby match, and he was more excited for this than anything. While walking home, he would do so with Tom and Inu for a short while, a requirement that Kai had set up. Then Tom would split off early on to head in a different direction. It was then that Gary found himself in a familiar situation. A group of students had surrounded him, and they all wore the Eton High uniform. Haha, Gary started to laugh. Usually he would be annoyed, but today he welcomed it, for he could do with the extra EXP. At the same time, Inu couldn't wait to pay back those that had hurt him before. Unbeknownst to Gary, similar scenes were playing out elsewhere. He wasn't the only target of this surprise attack. At that moment, every regular member of the Ruby Club that was supposed to play had been targeted. In a certain alleyway down the streets of Slough, Eton High had sent out more students to attack a certain individual compared to others. Walking out of the alleyway into the sunlight, his hands were bloody. "They attacked me again," Blake thought to himself, spitting blood out from his mouth. "These guys are scum." In the alleyway itself, 6 students could be seen laying down on the floor hurt. 6 guys from Eton High had suddenly surrounded Gary and Inu, and it was clear that they hadn't come for a simple talk. However, Gary had instantly noticed that something was different about this attack compared to the last one. These guys were nowhere near as bulky, and as it turned out, they were far worse in a fight. They don't seem to belong to the rugby club. Were they just regular students at Eton High? Did I mess them up so badly that they're now scared of me? No, otherwise they wouldn't have attacked me a second time and only sent out these guys. Gary wondered as he looked at the students rolling about in pain on the ground. After the fight, Gary had realized something, how much he had improved. Inu's training had paid off, and his improvement in stats, although minimal, really showed during this fight. He was practically untouchable to anyone who had never fought before. Hey, what was that all about? Why the hell did you get in my way? Only to punch those guys out yourself. Were your three too easy? Inu complained. Look, I know you've been improving, and you might want to show off, but there was no need to do that. If this was a game, then what you would have just done was similar to kill stealing. My bad. I was just trying to look out for you. I was worried that if you exert yourself, it would be bad for your injury. I mean, we have that tag team match coming up soon. Can't allow my partner to get any more hurt on my watch, right? Gary apologized with a smile, rubbing the back of his head. Besides, if this was a game, shouldn't you let me kill the last guys from my penna? If only you knew, Gary thought to himself, as he had gotten in Inu's way exactly to steal his opponents. His system only rewarded him EXP for those he himself knocked out. As this was a rare opportunity, he had to make the most of it, even if it meant that Inu might feel patronized. With his increased strength and charging heart, it was far easier than last time. He hadn't received any quest for it, yet the 6 students had still awarded him with 120 EXP, combined with the daily quest he had been doing each day before practice. It was enough for him to finally get the level up he had worked towards. Congratulations, you have now reached level 5. The stat point has been granted. 95/628 EXP. I kind of been hoping to get another skill that might help me in my fight against Billy. Oh well, good thing I at least got Claw Drain recently. System, mind explaining why I got 20 EXP for these guys while I got 25 EXP for their friends? Is it because they're weak, or because my level increased? As usual, Gary got no response. His werewolf system truly was a fickle mistress. However, after a few steps, he did receive a new message. New main quest received. You have grown as a werewolf, and you're still not dead yet. That's a surprise. Continue to grow and reach level 10, where a new class awaits. Objective, reach level 10. Reward, select a class. A class. Now this is really starting to feel like a game. Well, even as a werewolf class, that doesn't even make sense. I already had so much trouble wrapping my head around the alpha thing. It was something that Gary would just have to worry about when he reached that level. That was if he could survive the night of the full moon. He knew he had no chance of leveling up 5 levels by then. So, he decided to focus on what he could do. He needed to figure out where exactly he would be putting this stat point. Knowing that Billy was out there possibly waiting for him to attack, it didn't seem wise to save it up. Now that he knew for a fact that each of his 3 base stats could be increased through training and hunting targets, he decided to place the point into energy or health. I guess energy is more versatile. 10 more health won't really help me, but this way I can use it for charging heart or claw drain. Being able to replenish my health seems better than having a bigger pool, and who knows how many more skills I will get in the future. If only I knew if Billy also has skills like me. Your energy has now increased to a maximum of 120. There was another reason why Gary had chosen energy. The closer it got to the full moon, the faster his points were going down, even if he turned off the marks. Hey, who ordered you to attack us? Spill it. Inu yelled at one of the students as he grabbed him by the collar. The injured guy was still barely conscious, unable to reply. Let's just leave them be. I don't think they're going to say anything, and if we stay here, we might attract the wrong kind of attention. Gary suggested as he was in a good mood after feeling himself grow a little bit stronger. You don't understand. I know these guys because I used to be with them. I know everyone who could put up a fight, but these ones are just mere scrubs. They wouldn't attack us without a reason. I need to know if Eden High got a new leader after I transferred. Inu kept shaking the guy, but not getting any answer. He took to another. Still no reaction. He gave Gary an annoyed look, to which the high schooler just shrugged. Later that night, Gary went to sleep as he did every night, but when he woke up, he was greeted with the message he had been putting off for a long time. Your bloodlust grows even further. Eden High had clubs, just like every other school. There were a couple of students who had entered the rugby club and had changed everything in the school. Although it was Sunday, they had a special training to get ready for tomorrow's match against Westbridge. Out on the field, there were 2 boys who stood in front of everyone rather than a teacher. They were tall and had a small frame with both hands in their pockets. One had long red hair that was tied up in a ponytail, and by his side was another teenager who looked almost identical to him. The only difference was that this one had short hair. The long-haired one gave his team instructions like a coach would until some students came running to the field. It was obvious that none of them were part of the rugby club. Sren, when we dealt with those guys just as you asked, only Group 4 and 7 had problems. One of the students reported. That's good enough. Sren, the short-haired brother, replied with a yawn. Since the rest of the groups completed this task, it will be an easy win for us. Tomorrow's going to be a cakewalk, as usual. Waking up the next day, Gary had read the dreaded message, the one that he had been putting off for the longest time. The full moon is nearly upon you. Every fiber of your being is waiting in anticipation. Current bonus, all stats +3. Your bloodlust grows even further. One day until the next full moon. Damn it, I was hoping I actually wouldn't get stronger. The more power I borrow from the moon, the quicker my energy goes down. Gary's expulsion was finally over, and he had prepared the apology letter for Stephen and his family. Coincidentally, it was also the day of their big match. This was the reason why he had woken up extra early. Gary started to feel the effect of his bloodlust, but fortunately catching a few rats was enough to satisfy his urge and hunger for the next few hours. He estimated that it should be enough to get him by until lunch, though he would most likely go out again instead of eating in. In school, Gary and Tom were among the first ones who had arrived, and Tom couldn't help but be worried about his friend. I know I can't stop you from playing, but I at least want you to promise to meet up with me afterwards, okay? We need to sort out your personal problem. If we can't stop you from turning, at least we should try and hold you somewhere where you won't be able to hurt anybody. Tom shared his plan. I've done a lot of research, and there are quite a few people that you might end up going for. The most likely candidates are me as your best friend, your family members, as well as just the first person you might see. So we need to try and stop all of that. Gary was pretty sure that there was a good chance that he would go for someone else entirely. Since he hadn't bothered to try and get rid of the mark from Gil, he was the only hunting target left. Ever since he had seen what he had done to the old man the other day, Gary was coming more and more around to the idea that if anyone was to die, he wouldn't feel too horrible if it was scum like him. In a way, he wouldn't be doing it himself either. It was his werewolf self, so he wouldn't even feel like he was the one that killed him. Last chance to change your mind. Are you sure you should be playing today, especially with the full moon around the corner? Tom asked, not hoping for much. I keep telling you I'm fine, man. Have you seen me attack anyone? You haven't exactly been to school, so who knows what you've been up to? Tom argued. There are plenty of annoying people in school that you might attack, and it might be worse when you're out there on the rugby field. Fine, I'll stop nagging. Tom could see the look on Gary's face. He wasn't going to give up. At lunch, the rugby team was given permission to skip the whole afternoon lessons to go through some plans for this evening's match. The whole school was also invited to watch, mostly due to Mr. Root promising headmistress young results. When the rugby club went out on the field, there was something quite noticeable straight away. Gary could smell it as soon as he arrived. I've smelt this before. It was only when he saw the conditions of the others that he realized that everyone was injured in some way. Mr. Root was pacing backwards and forwards, biting his fingernails. How could this happen? You're telling me that they've actually gone so far as to attack all of you? Some students had gotten lucky, running away and making a break for it while their friends had taken a beating. Others seemed to have been let off easily. They had still been injured, but not to the point that they required medical attention. Still, it would take them a week or so to heal naturally. Hey, do you think what happened to us happened to all of them as well? Inu asked. Mr. Root then let out a big sigh, shaking his head. God damn it. Letting you out on the field will do nothing but add insult to injury. There's just one choice left. Benchwarmers, I'll need you all to fill in the positions of the regulars. Get ready, everyone, because we will be playing tonight. Tom was pointing at himself, because it took him a moment to process what this meant. I'm going to get killed. Tom gulped. Don't worry. Gary placed his hand on his shoulder. I'll protect you. Although they were meant to be words of comfort, it just made Tom worry even more. This evening, everyone had gotten into their uniform. It would be an interesting match, to say the least. However, one student in particular felt a growing migraine come up. Kai was walking up the stairs, looking at the black face of his golden rim watch. He could see that he still had a few hours until a match. All Westbridge students had been invited to watch their school's rugby team compete against Eton High's, and for certain reasons, the high schooler wanted to make it back before it would start. The reason why Kai had to worry about time was because at this very moment, even though it was a school day, he was at a different school. What's more, he had just opened the door leading to the rooftop, where he found a lone figure. "I was told you would be here." Kai spoke up. "A smoker, eh? If you treasure your body, you should drop it. In a couple of years, you'll start to feel the difference. It's up to you. The gang sure as hell will enjoy squeezing the money off of you." The student took another puff from his cigarette before throwing it on the floor, stepping on it. He then turned around, looking directly at Kai, while making sure his hair was still kept up in the perfect shape. "People from other schools usually only come here because they want to fight," Austin stated. "However, the last person I hit saved my arse, so I've decided to take it easy from now on. Since you haven't outright attacked me or challenged me in a flashy manner, I'll take it. You want something else from me?" Hearing this, Kai smiled and threw out a business card. It cut through the air easily, and Austin was able to catch it. "A green little birdie told me about your fight against a certain school invader. Apparently, you actually managed to hurt that oversized pig monster, which means you're strong." Kai said, "Let me ask you something. What do you plan to do once you graduate? You might feel on top of the world right now, being in charge of all these kids, but that will change once you get out. I looked into you, and judging from your current grades, are barely enough to let you pass, meaning you'll struggle to find a good job, and your so-called friends that might stick with you these days, well, they'll have no reason to stay by your side. Your fighting skills are good for the average teenager. If you plan to join a gang, you will quickly find out that out there on the streets, where people fight every single day, best case scenario, your skills might allow you to be a team leader. You might not be at the bottom of the barrel, but you'll be far from the top. However, if you want a better future, come to the place on that card in a couple of days. If nothing else, I can at least guarantee that you will end up seeing something very interesting." Austin looked at the card and could see an address written on it. When he looked up, he could see Kai was already about to leave. "That's it? You've come here to give me a lecture and a salesman pitch?" Austin shouted. "Yup, but the lecture was on the house. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got a game to watch." Kai replied without turning around, shutting the door behind him. It was about time for the match to start. All the players that would be fielded today were currently in the locker room, yet Blake, Gary, and Gil were the only regulars. The rest were those who had usually done nothing but warm the bench. All of the bench warmers were nervous since this was a last-minute change due to unforeseen circumstances. "My bones are too fragile for this crap. If any of those guys tackle me, I'm going to be killed." Tom whined, his legs actually shaking. "SH*T, I was just in the hospital. If I go there again, my parents will probably make me drop out and start homeschooling me. Just pass the ball to me every time you get it, all right? You can let me handle all that stuff." Gary tried to encourage his best friend. Mr. Root looked at the players at his disposal and couldn't stop shaking his head. Today would possibly be his last day as Westbridge's coach. Knowing this, he placed his hands on the shoulders of his most promising players. "Blake, Gary, I'll be counting on the both of you. Get out there and win this for our school. If you manage to do that, I'll treat you to an all-you-can-eat buffet." Mr. Root promised earnestly. "You mean it, Coach? You'll pay for all of us?" A large but unathletic student asked with large eyes, suddenly having found some motivation to give it his best. "I actually meant just these two, but I guess that would be seen as favoritism." "Oh, what the hell? These kids need some encouragement, and if it saves my job, it's a cheap price to pay." "Sure," Mr. Root answered after a slight moment of hesitation, giving them all a thumbs up. "Now get out there and score some points to earn your meal." Mr. Root reverted to his usual tone. Outside, the stands were filling up. It was a home match for Westbridge, so Eton High was the one coming to their school. Their buses had arrived, and the supporters as well as the members started to come out and walk towards the field and stands. Nearly all of the supporters were students, and the Westbridge students noticed that they all looked a bit rough around the edges. Glances from the other side caused the students to quickly look away. "Kill them. Make sure you break their legs." Inu screamed from the stands, standing up at the very back. Everyone turned around, yet for some reason, Inu's words gave them confidence to shout and cheer for their team. "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" A voice asked him suddenly. When Inu turned to look at the person, he noticed that a beauty had approached him, someone he recognized from his class. "You're Xian, right? You sure you wouldn't rather sit with the girls from our class?" he asked, getting all red-faced. Xian looked at the girls, who were surrounding and praising Tiffany. "I've actually only transferred here myself, so I'm still a bit of a loner. If it's a problem or you're reserving that seat for someone else, I can just look for another." Inu quickly shook his head and patted the seat next to him, clearing off the dust, and then gestured for the girl to take the seat. Not far off in the stands, some of the parents had also come to watch the match. Today the seats were emptier than usual. After all, most of the regulars weren't going to be playing today. Nevertheless, several mothers had turned up because there was a rumor that a certain someone would arrive. As it turned out, that rumor was true. A tall, muscular, handsome man who looked to be in his early 30s had appeared. He had a clean-shaved beard and short hair, giving him the appearance of a top-class actor. Of course, this person wasn't oblivious to the stares and gave his fans a friendly wave back to them. "He is so dreamy." Tiffany squealed a little bit. "It looks like Blake gets his good looks from his dad," one of her drones added. Finally, it was time for the teams to face each other. The ones walking at the front were Blake and Gil, as they were the most senior members. The captain of the rugby club walked confidently, yet his partners seemed to be somewhat lost. Facing them was the team from Eton High, led by the twins Sren and Lung. As they saw who they would be facing, everyone on their side broke out in laughter. Although most of the Westbridge team looked scared, there were two members who were more determined than ever. Getting into the center of the field, the group started to practice a little, and soon the game would start. "Gary," Tom whispered to his best friend. "Don't try too hard, okay?" Gary looked back and gave a thumbs up. He looked into the crowd and could suddenly see Xian and Inu sitting next to each other, and the next moment he could feel something burn inside of him. "Sorry, Tom, I might have to try a little hard," Gary thought to himself. What Gary didn't know was that not too far away, looking at the field from behind some trees, was a single large teenage boy. "We don't have long. I'll be waiting for you," Billy thought, licking his lips. Before the match was about to start, Gary wanted to check on a couple of things. For one, his growing headache that just wouldn't go away. He tried his best to hide it, as he didn't want Tom to notice, else his best friend would just nag him even more, only worsening his headache. 7 hours until the next full moon. This was the reason for his headache, and this wasn't even the first notification either. Around 5 hours ago, a message had popped up informing him that there were 12 hours until the next full moon, and it had repeated every hour since. Just like the previous ones, he mentally closed it before he went to check on his energy bar. 100/120 energy. The reason why his energy levels were still so high was due to him having enjoyed a big lunch. He had eaten a lot and was even stealing food from the others. At the same time, while walking around school, there was always some type of creature he could find not too far away. He hated to admit it, but he was getting used to this scavenger lifestyle. Nevertheless, without really doing anything, and even after toggling off his marks, 20 energy points had been consumed. It looks like after this game, I'll have to go hunting again before trying to sort out this werewolf crap. Gary let out a big sigh as he got into his newly assigned position. Today, he was placed on the right wing, while Blake would be on the left wing. Even though he wasn't left-handed, the stat player could play well in any position. I should probably refrain from using Charging Heart for now. Let's see how I do with just my basic stats. Initially, one of the benchwarmers had been selected to start the match by kicking the ball. However, he dropped the ball, and it hit the ground as he swung his leg and missed the ball. To avoid further embarrassment, Mr. Root requested Blake to be the kicker. It was a good, strong kick that made it to the other side, signaling the start of the game. In rugby, the players naturally ran as a line together. This was the same as the other team. To score a point, one would have to run up to the long white try line to score. The main rules were that you could only throw back the ball, you could use your feet and hands on the ball, but other than that, players were free to tackle each other as they wished. Gary immediately ran towards the player who caught the ball. The Eton High players were confident in their strength, especially when they saw a scrawny boy come towards them. Even if they got tackled, they intended to pass the ball to the next person before falling. However, Gary got close and immediately dived down, hitting the ball carrier's legs. The surprised student fell down like a sack of potatoes. Part of it was due to the unexpectedness of the unconventional method used, but the other half was because of the strength that he felt from Gary. When the student fell, he dropped the ball, yet a short-haired, red-haired boy picked it up almost instantly. Sren ran forward, yet Gary quickly recovered and went in for another tackle. As he dived, the new ball carrier quickly spun and thereby evaded the attack. Too slow. Sren sneered, running forward. Using his agility and his teammates, he was able to avoid most of the Westbridge team. Blake was their last defense. Another player ran across trading paths with Sren. It only took a split second, and the redhead continued to run forward. Blake successfully tackled him to the ground, but that's when he could see that he no longer had the ball. You might be a good player, but you seem to be lacking in the brains department. Sren taunted the other. The referee blew into his whistle, signaling that Eaton High had scored the first point of the match. As for the one that had scored, it was none other than Lung. Damn it, Gary cursed, kicking the ground. He was mostly upset that he had let the other person get away. During the last 2 weeks, rugby had become more than a mere hobby for Gary. Thanks to the system, his performance had improved immensely, allowing him to play earnestly. He knew that he was basically cheating, but it just felt good to be recognized for once. Of course, being allowed to work off his frustration was a nice bonus. The game restarted with Eaton High kicking off. Alas, now that Westbridge was in possession of the ball, things only got worse. The passes were bad, as it instantly became obvious that the fielded players lacked any actual practice. Gary was having his own problems, as if he saw that Gill was open, the only other decent player on their team. He refused to pass to him. It didn't help that they were all scared of getting hit by the other team. They all got rid of the ball so fast that one might mistake them playing hot potato over rugby. Tom was in the unfortunate situation that he got past the ball, yet Gary had been too far away from him. Having hesitated for too long, the high schooler ended up getting hit before he could pass. Eaton High ended up scoring a total of 4 times, before Blake managed to finally score one single point, something he had Gary and Gill to thank for. Unlike in professional rugby, the high school didn't use multiple points per touchdown and just counted them as one for simplicity. Gary yelled, "I can't catch those 2 redheads. They're too fast and nimble. They get away every time, even with my current speed. I should be okay if I use it until the end of the game, right? I know the halftime still hasn't been called." Gary tried to convince himself, unwilling to let his first rugby match end in a complete catastrophe. It would be one thing if the other team was simply better than theirs, but it just didn't sit well with him that they were sorely losing because of Eaton High's dirty tactics. To be honest, Gary wasn't sure if they could win, even if they had all of their regulars. That was what was more annoying. Eaton High were good, so why the need to resort to dirty tactics? Gary had already been doing well in the game without having to use charging hard. This was mostly due to the power of the moon. Otherwise, he would have still fallen slightly behind the athletic students. But now, with charging hard active and the power of the moon, Gary was at his strongest. Since Blake had luckily managed to score a point, it was time for Westbridge to kick off the ball again. "Coach Root, let me do it." Gary raised his hand, asking for permission. With how things were going, Mr. Root didn't really care. It was obvious that Eaton High would put more people on Blake now, leaving virtually no chance for a comeback. Blake or Gill didn't voice any objection, so the teacher just allowed the high schooler to do as he wished. Getting ready, Gary dropped the ball and booted it as hard as he could. He had powered all of his frustration into kicking the ball and didn't hold back. The ball went high in the air and further than any of Blake's kicks and downs so far. It had gone so far some people even thought it was going to hit the try line. In the end, it was a few meters short. Sren had run all the way to the back, but even with his speed, he was unable to get back in time to catch it. "Did you see that kick? I don't even think I've seen that in professional rugby games." One of the parents commented, "Well, it's a smaller pitch, but that was definitely an impressive kick." Another added, "What some of the players at Eaton High noticed, and same with Blake, was the kick Gary had done had no signs of proper technique. The ball shouldn't have gone that far," meaning he had done it all with raw power. Gary, I'm thankful that you're on our team, but the improvement you have had, what happened to you? Blake thought. The game went on, and Blake surprisingly managed to snatch the ball off of one of their players, but just as Mr. Root feared, after that the team had him surrounded. They knew there was no need to focus on the other players, and they were blocking his path from passing to Gil. Gary, seeing this, had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. You can do it, right? Then go show them what you got. Blake chucked the ball right through the gap towards Gary, and after catching the ball like a rocket, he was off. Gary just ran straight. He knew better than to try and use any fancy footwork that he wasn't used to evade the opposition. One of the Eaton High players went for the tackle, but the ball carrier just continued running even when his legs were touched. Gary was like a train on tracks, not stopping in the least. Once he got past the first two, it was smooth sailing until he reached the try line to score a point. I did it. I scored a point. Gary yelled out in triumph. He then looked over the stands and enjoyed the feeling of being cheered on, especially since the one person he was looking out for gave him a standing ovation. Did you see that? Lung asked his brother. Since when did Westbridge have someone like him? Was he holding back on us the entire time? Of course I saw that. Sren answered in frustration. It was one thing to lose a point to the star player, but this was something completely unexpected, and he didn't like that. No idea what's gotten into that guy. According to our intel, he was supposed to be a bench warmer, just like the rest of them. Now it seems like he's their star player. Let's just put more people on him. The game continued, but that wasn't the only point Gary ended up scoring. With his sheer power, he was able to force his way through nearly each time. At some point, some of the players on Blake were also put on him. Using that opportunity, he would pass the ball, allowing the real star players score. When the referee called for a break, the score was 7-4 for the home team. They had managed to nearly double the others' points, but there was still a problem. Despite his boost, he was unable to catch up to either of the twins. What's more, his energy had decreased sharply, which would make it risky to use charging hard again. During the break, Tom approached Gary. I'm guessing your sudden boost in performance is due to the moon. Do you feel any different? Any sudden urges? Tom asked carefully. Gary smiled back as he went back into position. Just a healthy desire to win this match. Both teams went into position. Gary noticed the twins had an evil smile on their faces. In those few minutes, they had devised a strategy for how to deal with the annoying greenhead. After the kick, Gary was in possession of the ball, yet 5 people had him surrounded. It was the required number of people to stop him without making it too easy for Blake to score. Already used to this, Gary had no choice but to pass the ball to the closest person, Tom. They had done this a few times already, and his best friend would usually just pass it on to the next person. But as soon as the ball left Gary's fingertips, 2 red-headed students could be seen running through. Before he had any chance to react, they both crushed Tom, banging into him from either side. He fell to the ground in seconds, but that wasn't the end of it. Turning around, both of them with their studded metal boots stepped on Tom's hand. It had gone right through his palm, causing him to bleed. Why the F*** CK, is it always me? Tom screamed in pain. In almost an instant, Gary leapt from where he was, landing right on top of Sren, pinning him to the ground. I'll kill you. Moments before the incident, up in the stands, Xian noticed something strange in the stand opposite theirs. One of the Eaton High students had a handheld camera in his hand and was filming the entire match. Next to him was another student with a laptop who seemed completely focused on it and nothing else around him. Doesn't that look a bit strange? They've been filming since the start of the match, Xian mentioned, as something was giving her the feeling that things weren't as they seemed. Is it? Inu just shrugged it off. His attention was on the game, ever since Gary started to just bulldoze his way through the field. There was a certain excitement from everyone watching each time he got the ball. Don't a lot of sports teams film their matches? It's not like anyone else will film such an amateur match. It makes it easy to replay important moments and learn from them so they can improve. Inu added as he looked up. Although now that I say it, that doesn't sound like them. Come to think of it, if they were that diligent about getting better, then they should have had no need to attack all the regulars. They attack you guys. Xian yelped out, surprised. No wonder I barely recognize any of the members. If it had only been the camera guy, then she wouldn't have thought much of it, but it was the fact that the student next to them also had the computer when they should have been focusing on the game. It was then, though, that a loud shout from a familiar voice was heard, grabbing her attention completely. "I'll kill you," Gary shouted, having pinned down one of the Eton High players, and it was one of the twins, Sren. It was seemingly out of nowhere, and so fast that both teams didn't know how to act. Looking at Sren, Gary had already pulled back his fist and threw it out. Moving his head to the side, just in time, the high schooler ended up hitting nothing but the ground beneath, making it hard for anyone looking to know just how hard the punch was. The first one to act from Eton High was Sren's brother Long, but as the two of them met eyes, Sren just shook his head, and his brother backed down, while also looking back at the stands, making sure everything was okay. "You slimy little snake," Gary cursed as he pulled back his fist again, ready to aim at the other's chest. However, by this time his fellow players from Westbridge had arrived and were trying to stop him from doing something stupid and grabbed onto his arms. "Stop it, Gary. He wants you to hit him. If you attack him, they'll kick you off the pitch." One of the students tried to reason with him as he held onto Gary's outstretched arm. Alas, he wasn't listening and looked at Sren, who gave him a satisfied smirk, making him want to punch him even more. For people were pulling Gary back, and yet it looked as if it still wasn't enough for them to pull him off until a certain person came and pushed him off the other from the front. Sren didn't thank him and just sked as he went away. Gary could see Blake above him. "What the hell are you doing? That guy hurt Tom. If you get him, I W dash." "Stop," Tom shouted, holding his hand. "I'm okay. They only pierced my skin a little. It just hurt a lot. That's all." Although this might have been the case, that wasn't why Gary was angry. He could tell that what they had done was intentional. They had hurt his friend again after Gary had talked about Tom being safe next to him. With this thought in his head, Gary continued to charge forward, and the players were there trying to hold him back again. But with Gary's strength, he was just skidding them across the grass. Still, Blake stood firmly in his way. Seeing this, his father stood up from the crowd. "He must be worried about his son." One of the mothers said, "That boy is so vicious. Where's his mother?" Another asked. In a stand not too far away, Kai was also watching the match with Marie. "Is this what you expected?" Marie asked. Kai smiled, looking at the sight. "No, it's even better. He is exactly who we need. I've never seen someone get so angry over a friend being hurt like that. He's perfect." "Gary," Tom shouted, getting in between Blake and him. "I'm fine." Tom held up his hand, showing that his wound wasn't a big deal. He could even still play. Seeing this, Gary finally seemed to somewhat settle down. However, the referee looked to be in a troublesome spot, wondering just what to do. Mr. Root, seeing this, quickly went to his side and placed his hands together as if he was begging. "Now come on, there's no need to do anything. These are just hot-headed teens. Of course they're going to get aggressive in a fight like this. Besides, in the end, only our player was the one that actually got hurt." Mr. Root argued. The referee glanced at the teacher. He understood why he was being this way. From watching the match, Westbride's team were mostly made of amateurs, and the one that had gotten involved in a scuffle was one of their star players. If he was taken out of the game, then there would be no hope for Westbridge. He also was aware of Eton High's reputation, so he was sure their attack wasn't a coincidence. It was only because of this that the ref at the end of the day decided to keep the game going on with no consequences on either side. Before the match was to resume, Gary went to look at Tom's hand. "You seem to be getting hurt a lot these days. Are you sure you're okay, and it's not just the adrenaline?" Gary asked. Tom lifted his hand up again, showing his best friend the wound. "Look, it's only a flesh wound. It just ripped the skin a little. It will be fine dash." Strangely, Gary grabbed onto Tom's hand and looked at it closely. At first, Tom thought it was out of concern, and he just wanted a closer look, but then he noticed that the other's eyes seemed almost obsessed with it. "Gee, Gary? Oi, Gary!" Tom shouted, yet the other was still holding onto his hand. At that moment, Gary was having visions of biting down on Tom's hand. He soon let go and almost fell back to the ground as he backed up. I got to get out of this game, Tom. I have to leave now," Gary mumbled, and that's when Tom noticed that there was a significant change to Gary. His eyes, they no longer looked like that of a human, and instead had gone slightly yellow, changing shape. "Are you changing?" "Right here, right now." Tom helplessly looked around for a way for the other to disappear. The look in Tom's eyes said it all. Gary saw the way he had been staring at him. No matter what had happened so far, his best friend had never pulled a face quite like this before. "Stop it! Stop it! Why are you looking at me like that?" Gary thought. At the moment, Tom wanted to reach out to Gary, but his body froze up. He didn't know what to do, as it was the first time he had actually seen his best friend slightly change. Sure, the other had told him what he was, but seeing it happen appeared to have awoken a primal instinct in him that made him want to run away. Tom had seen many altered change into their beast form, but Gary's case was clearly different. Shaking his head, he managed to get a grip on himself and started to look around to see if anyone else had noticed. It was at that moment that Gary himself covered up, putting his head into his shirt. "Come on, Gary, calm down. Calm down. What's going on, system? I should still have time." The last notification was about the full moon being 6 hours away. So why am I changing now? Gary asked himself in a panic, still covering his head. "Gary, it's going to be okay." He could hear Tom's voice, but he refused to look at him, afraid of what might happen. "If you need to get out of here, then don't let us stop you. It's just a stupid high school rugby game anyway. Heck, it's the first one this season. Look, I want you to head over to the Tsepin side of town, to a storage warehouse called Yellow Stack. There is a storage unit in my family's name. My parents use it to store some items from the experiments they run, but I managed to find out their passcode to it. Just in case, I placed a few things inside that should hopefully help with your situation. If you feel like you can't control it, lock the door to stop you from going out. We'll get through this together, okay?" Gary had carefully listened to Tom's entire speech. At the same time, he had done his best to breathe in and out deeply, further helping him calm his heart down. His charging heart skill had finished. Eventually, his heart rate lowered below 150 BPM, and slowly he came out from his shirt. "Gary, you're..." From the look on Tom's face, Gary could tell that his appearance had gone back to default. "Thank you, Tom. I feel better now. I believe I know what was causing the problem. I should be able to stay," Gary said hesitantly before quickly adding, "just for a short while. I mean, Mr. Root practically begged the ref to let me stay, so I don't want to upset everyone now. It had to be charging heart. Yeah, that must have been it. With how close it's to the full moon, my elevated heart rate must be messing with me. Tom's wound might have just triggered it. I swear, after this game, I'll head straight to that storage unit." Gary tried to convince himself as he inched back to his position. The game was about to resume, though Tom wasn't sure if Gary had made the right decision since he had no idea how the other felt. He just knew that getting close to his best friend wasn't advisable right now, not because he was scared of him, but because he was afraid that his wound might be the cause of the other's change. As the game resumed, the two teams continued as normal. Eaton had possession of the ball, and Lung was holding onto it tightly. He then looked over his shoulder for a second to see where his brother was. Yet in that brief moment, the ball was snatched from his hands by none other than Blake. He quickly ran past all the others, proving why he was the team captain and team ace. Sren, who was further back, went in for the tackle, but with a jump, Blake narrowly avoided it and went on to score the try. Everyone from Westbridge unanimously started to cheer the star player's name. The girls' screams were especially deafening. "If you're going to stop me from getting the ball from my own teammates, then I'll just have to steal it from you guys instead." As the game continued, Gary had become far more passive than in the first half. Not that it stopped his team from passing him the ball. After all, that's what had gotten them the points so far. However, it quickly became noticeable that Gary's speed had dropped and something had changed in him ever since the fight. "You're slow, even slower than at the start." Lung alone tackled Gary to the ground. Meanwhile, Shren picked up the loose ball and continued to run forward, but once again Blake was ready, as if he had predicted Gary's fall. He stopped their advance, and it was time for another turnaround. Alas, he alone could only do so much. Fortunately, they had managed to get a good lead in the first half. The game came to an end with a score of 9-9, making it a draw. "We drew. We freaking did it." Mr. Root cheered. "I get to keep my job, and I don't even need to treat anyone to dinner." Of course, it was all thanks to Blake, and the team started to lift him into the air, throwing him celebrating their draw as if they had won. Although Gary had done a lot for the team, it had been limited to the first half. It was strange, because the way Sren and Lung were acting, it was as if they had lost. "What is wrong with you all?" Sren shouted in anger, punching one of his own teammates, causing them to fall to the ground. The spectators could see this, but now that the game was over, they could do nothing about it. Neither Eaton High's teachers nor the other did anything about it, seemingly used to this sort of behavior. "We knew that Blake was a good player. We knew if we played against him with him, it would be risky." Lung argued the outcome. What we didn't expect was for him to be good as well. As for who Lung was referring to, it was naturally Gary. The outlier looked to be staring into space with his head full of his own thoughts. His headache was becoming worse, and there was a slight dull ring that had appeared as well. The high schooler felt as if all the noises were drowned out from the outside. "That stupid git cost us a sh** ton of money." Sren cursed. He picked up the nearby rugby ball and threw it directly towards Gary. Those in the crowd watching gasped but could do nothing as it hit its designated target. It was a clean hit connecting to his head from the side, making Gary fall to the ground. "Arm my head!" Gary yelled out, his hands on the grass, and closed his hands together, grabbing the mud. "Is he seriously hurt or something? Rugby balls aren't that hard." Inu asked with worry, looking at his gang leader. He was furious and was ready to give the twin a taste of his own medicine, but he knew it was impossible to get to him, not with his entire team behind him. "Ark!" Gary shouted almost, but managed to hold it in so it sounded like a few grunts. The parents couldn't hear because the students were still celebrating their draw, and Tom didn't want to get close, afraid that the smell of blood would just worsen the situation even further. "No, he's acting really strange. I don't think the rugby ball caused that. He looks to be in incredible pain, and it looks like he's sweating," Xian pointed out. It was hard to see from her position. The two of them weren't the only ones that had noticed this. Kai and Marie had both been keeping an eye on Gary as well. The action of the sore loser was way out of line, but Gary's reaction was also unnatural. "Gary, get out of here!" Tom shouted from what he deemed to be a safe distance. "You have to go home early, don't you? Your mom and sister are waiting for you." This was a lie. As far as his family knew, he would be staying at Tom's tonight after the match, so they wouldn't get suspicious when they returned, but he was just hoping his words would get through. *Awu. Was that a wolf howl? Those from the crowd wondered. It sounded so clear and clean. It was a sound they had only heard in movies, and they could tell it had come from the direction of the woods that were near the fields. "A wolf? Here in our backwoods town? That's crazy." Inu nervously laughed it off, but glanced in the direction of the nearby woods. When they turned around to look back on the field, though, Gary was no longer there. It was only for a split second that Tom had taken his eyes off of Gary to look into the direction that strange howl had come from. He looked everywhere on the field for his best friend, even asking some of the nearby players, but none of them had seen him disappear. Their focus had been on Blake and then on the wolf howl. That definitely sounded like a wolf. Don't tell me that was the other werewolf. Was that howl meant to be some sort of challenge? Please be safe, Gary. He wasn't the only one who was confused about the sudden disappearance of a certain high schooler, though. Inu and Xian both had seen him get hit by the rugby ball, as well as the frantic Tom searching for him. They both decided to head down from the stands and ask him what had happened. Surprisingly, two more people were heading towards Tom from another stand. "Tom, you're Gary's friend, right? We saw him get hit by that scumbag, but now he's gone. Is he okay?" Xian was the first to speak. Hearing that the girl's question was along the lines of what Kai himself had wanted to ask Tom, he decided to just listen. Inu, noticing that Kai had come down, felt a little awkward since he didn't know how to behave around him. "You're also looking for Gary? Hang on a moment. What do you care anyway? I haven't heard you asking about him even once during his expulsion, but now you're worried? You don't even know him that well, and you're just a new guy, and you too. Holy *T, aren't you Kai Hemper, that rich kid from the year above?" Tom realized as he looked at those surrounding figures. The one and only. Kai let out a laugh at Tom's hilarious expression. "Would you kindly tell us where that green head is? We've become acquaintances, and I have something for him." Tom had a bad feeling about that. He had no clue at this moment how Gary had come to know all of these different people, or why they had suddenly cared for him. For as long as Tom could remember, it had just been the two of them against the world. I can't tell them about Gary, at least not today. No one can know about what he's going through right now. Otherwise, they might think he's the one that killed all of those. I don't know where Gary is. It's late, he probably went home. Tom shouted as he started to run away from the others before turning around for a moment. Don't go out after midnight tonight. Especially you, XIN, just stay at home. The other four looked at each other, and they all had the same expression. It was clear that Tom did know something and was trying to hide it, even though they didn't know why. Well, should we follow him? Marie asked the obvious. Depends. Does anyone have a better plan on how to find Greenie? Kai asked, but none of them spoke up. Inu quickly moved over to Kai and Marie to join them, but noticed that someone else was following them. Hey, it's pretty late, and you know how this town is. I mean, I'm happy to protect you and all, but I'm sure your parents are worried about you. Inu tried to gently tell XIN to go away without being too patronizing, yet still appearing strong. Don't worry, I can handle myself, XIN replied as she looked into the crowd of parents, and there was a man in a suit standing up. As long as he traveled with her, things would be fine. Kai didn't voice any objections, just shrugged, and with that the four of them decided to follow Tom's trail to see where he would go next, hoping that it would lead them to Gary. At the moment, Gary himself was covered in sweat as he sprinted towards the direction Tom had told him. He wasn't sweating because he was tired. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He was running through streets, staying in crowded areas. That howl, I'm sure that had to be from Billy. Has he somehow already transformed? If that's the case, he must be after me. Anyone who comes close to me will be in danger. It's the same for those close to me. For now, with all these people around, I don't think he'll attack me. I hope. Gary gulped as he recalled how Billy had attacked Inu during the day in school. So who knew what they were planning to do? An hour had passed, yet Gary had neither encountered Billy nor felt his presence. However, he had finally made it to Yellow Stack. 5 hours, 5 more hours. He isn't around, is he? Gary wondered as he started to sniff the air. He could only smell industry and faded scents. Turning the marks on, he needed a moment to find them, as they were quite faint. Tom had picked a perfect hiding place for him. This area didn't seem to have many living places, just factories with workers who would have already gone home. Unfortunately, Gary was still in his rugby uniform, which didn't have a hood, so he opted to enter from the roof instead of the front entrance, in case anyone was there or the cameras. Fortunately, Gary had had a lot of practice sneaking in recently, and with his current stats, it was quite easy for him to do. There were plenty of ledges and pipes where he could pull himself up with his own body weight, something that would have been impossible for the past him. One of the windows had been left open in the large storage warehouse from the top, and going through them, he found himself on some type of metal railing. He looked to see if there was anyone inside and even sniffed the air, but it didn't seem to be the case. I guess the storage units themselves are quite secure, so there's no need for a night guard. Gary looked at his phone, the regular one. Tom had sent him a text telling him it was storage unit 23 and that the passcode was his best friend's birthday. Going down, Gary eventually walked past all of them until he could finally see a large yellow painted 23 foot on the outside. I can't believe I'm going to spend the night, or maybe even the whole day in there, Gary thought to himself. He walked up to the container, and on the side of it, there was a little digital keypad. Inputting the code, the door slowly started to lift open and white lights from the ceiling were turned on. Whoa, what the hell is this place? This looks more like an abandoned lab than a storage unit, Gary thought as he stepped inside. He could see strange machines he didn't even know what they did, but they looked incredibly expensive. There were also books upon books piled up in the room. From what he could see, the majority seemed to be some scientific theories and discoveries. He carefully passed it until he saw that the very back looked different. It was the only place that had been cleared out. There was a table, and on the table there was a set of chains and a bag. Gary made sure to close the door behind him and locked it. Wait, what even happens if I transform? Will I be in control? If not, will my werewolf self know the code on how to get out? Maybe I'll become a primal beast who can't think straight. System, mind giving me a sneak peek or something? Gary looked inside the plastic bag, and he couldn't help but laugh, because at one point he would have loved to receive such a thing, especially in February, but now it looked very unappealing. After all, it was practically poison to him right now. Taking the bag off the floor, Gary then could see a chain on the table. A thick, heavy chain, and the table could be raised and had holes in it. They also had cuffs that once shut could only be opened by keys. So, I guess you want me to strap myself in this thing, right? Should I do that now? But I still have a few hours. Gary wasn't sure how much leeway he had. As such, he already started to familiarize himself with the process of chaining himself. Where did Tom even buy all this stuff? Probably online. Oh God, I don't even want to think how much all of it cost. Thank you, Tom. I promise, I'll pay you back in the future. Just need to literally survive first, though. Gary was finally set. The only thing left to do would be to clip the chains on his legs and arms. Tom messaged him, saying to text him after everything was over and he was back to his regular self. If he didn't hear from him, he would come pick him up in 24 hours and unlock it. Gary's 2 phones were placed on another table on the side. The high schooler waited until the timer was down to its last hour. Now, knowing that Billy hadn't appeared, he decided to click in both of the cuffs on his legs and then finally clipped the ones on his hands. He waited and waited, but time seemed to be moving incredibly slow. His only company was the system that was counting down to midnight. All right, it doesn't look like Billy followed me. I just hope he can't sense where I am or something when I change, and I hope this will be able to hold me back. Gary thought. Finally, the time had come. As soon as Gary saw those messages appear, he started to feel a change in his body. It began with his heartbeat. Someone seemed to have put the intensity all the way to the maximum setting. When he checked his status in the system, he saw that the BPM was constantly rising, already having surpassed 200 BPM with no signs of stopping. It felt like his organ was trying its best to either burst through his chest or jump out of his mouth. The increased oxygen flow inside his body led to Gary experiencing everything more vividly, from his feet all the way to the top of his head. The high schooler immediately pulled on the chains from the pain, yet they did their job perfectly, preventing him from touching his head. Unfortunately for Gary, though, the strange sensations didn't stop there. The next thing that he noticed was that his skin started to feel uncomfortable. He felt constricted, as if he had put on a shirt that was a few sizes too small. He wasn't sure if he was hallucinating or not, but he believed that he saw it start to fall off of him. "Arr!" Gary loudly screamed out in pain, his throat on the verge of ripping, but he needed to do something to release this pressure that was piling up. The veins on his arms and neck became visible. They had grown in size, looking like faint tubes about to burst due to the pressure they were under. His muscles started to grow, and more skin started to fall off from his body, being replaced by dark black fur. "Someone please make it stop. This pain, I can't take it anymore." Gary begged internally as he screamed out all his frustrations, aware that nobody was out there to hear or help him. It was getting too much for him, and he was sure that he was losing his mind. "I have to stay focused. I have to stay conscious." The high schooler thought to himself, concentrating on the ones he tried to protect, his friends and family. Gary feared that something very bad would happen if his transformation overwhelmed him, and he wasn't sure that he would be able to live with himself if he hurt any of them. Just when he believed himself able to tolerate that amount of pain, his very bones started stretching. It was 100 times worse than any growth spurt, and it affected all of them at once. At some point, they collectively cracked before they all began to regenerate on the spot, growing longer and more durable. Finally, his face was itching all over as if a million tiny invisible bugs were crawling on it. His mouth, jaw, and nose seemed to shift around. His eyesight and vision was changing. Gary didn't even register that his ears had also elongated as his consciousness was slowly fading. "I'm sorry," was the last thing Gary had running through his mind. The 4 teenagers had been diligently following Tom around for a while now, ever since he had left the locker room. He had led them to an area of slough called Seep Inside. It was one of the more upmarket sides of the town. As nice as a tier 3 place could get at least. It was obvious that a lot of the money had been put into this area, as the teenagers saw a lot of nightlife despite how late it was being. There were restaurants, bars, and even clubs. It was an unusual sight in Slough, making Tom's presence more than strange. So far it had looked like he had been walking around aimlessly. Kai had carefully made sure that they stayed a distance away from him, cautious that Tom wouldn't spot them. But as time went on, they noticed that the one in front of him was oblivious to his own situation. He wasn't even paying attention to his surroundings, being far more concerned with his phone. Huh, so this is where all the big wigs of SLU live. I don't even see any gangs here. That's a nice change. Ina commented, "Of course there are gangs here." Kai sneered at the other's naivety. Otherwise, this place wouldn't be able to operate the way it is. In fact, this area is one of the more important places due to how much money it generates. You not seeing anyone just means that this particular area is protected by some gang nobody dares to mess with. They were on a pretty busy main street, and some of the adults were giving them funny looks, wondering what kids were doing here at this late hour. The only one who didn't look out of place among them was Kai. He even walked like the others. He's right, but who is this guy to know so much? Xian thought. Continuing to follow Tom, it honestly didn't feel like he was doing much, and constantly the group would check with each other to see if it was okay for them to be staying out this late. Since they were all school students, tomorrow would be a school day. Inu had no problem. He was free to do as he wished, similar to Kai and Marie. However, for Xian, she just had to check that a certain someone was still following them. Well, you guys surely have nothing better to do. It's almost midnight, and this is what you're doing. Kai asked. Well, I guess everyone has their special circumstances. No one said anything, so they continued on their wild rabbit chase until their target decided to eventually head out to the park. It was a shortcut that would allow someone to head to Yellow Stack and the warehouse side of Seepin. His plan was to stay here, since it should be far enough away for Gary to notice him, yet still close enough that he could get to Yellow Stack if something were to happen. Eventually, they all just watched Tom sitting down, staring at his phone. The group waited hiding behind trees a distance away. They waited and waited until one of them got frustrated. This is getting annoying, Marie called out, pacing over quickly. Hey, Tom. Immediately, he turned his head, face-palming as he realized that he had been followed. Since Marie had revealed herself, the rest came out as well, heading towards a high schooler together. We all have better things to do. Just tell us where the hell Gary went. Don't even try to *T us that you just came here for a walk. Seepin might be considered safe and all, but it's still incredibly dangerous. The girl demanded an answer, impatiently whipping with her foot. As the group continued to walk towards Tom, he got off from his seat and started to panic, looking for where to run off to. When he could see they were close, he had almost given up, but suddenly all of them stopped in their tracks. Standing behind them, they could see two glowing eyes from the foliage. They could hear the nasty sound of someone heavily breathing, letting out a nasty, snarling noise. Look out, Kai shouted as he sprinted to Tom, grabbing his underclassman by the wrist, pulling him forward. At that moment, two large claws swung down and a loud bang was heard. When they looked at what had happened, they could see that something had destroyed the bench Tom had been sitting on just moments ago. Now turning around, Tom could see what Kai had just saved him from. There was a figure that looked to be close to 2.5 meters in height. It had bulging muscles, claws, and was covered in dark fur, making it hard to see in the darkness. Its snout was large, and its razor-sharp teeth could be seen sticking out from its mouth. It's a WWW werewolf. Tom managed to stutter out, his hands shaking. At that moment, all of them froze in place, unsure what to do. Its glowing eyes had something hypnotizing to them, making them feel like prey in front of a large predator. Fortunately, someone else ran in front of them all, waking them up from their stupor. It was a man in a suit who had followed behind them. Xian, get away! The man yelled, turning his head. I will deal with this altered. The professional bodyguard was about to pull something out of his jacket, yet he never got the chance. The mythological creature had swiped once with his mighty arms. Before any of the teenagers could blink, the head of the man who had wanted to save them separated from his shoulders, flying past them into the park. The next second, the body fell to the ground, releasing a torrent of blood. All 5 of them knew that their lives were in danger. Their chances to survive this were slim to none. There were a lot of dangers that everyone needed to look out for in a Tier 3 town like SLU. The teenagers were being cautious, yet each one of them was quite confident in their own skills, believing that no matter what they would face today, that they would be able to deal with it. However, that was limited to their own common sense. A werewolf had naturally not been one of the things any one of them had been prepared to ever see in their life, much less tonight. As such, they had all slightly frozen in fear from the mythological beast that had appeared in front of them. Before they could really react, they witnessed how that large mass of muscle killed a man in front of their very eyes without any effort whatsoever. Tom immediately became watery-eyed, and he could feel something warm soaking his trousers, trickling down his leg. Did I just wet myself? Werewolves have a sensitive nose. Let's hope this will make me unappetizing to eat. However, the beast didn't attack them outright. Instead, it started to dig into the dead person who was on the ground, ripping the corpse to pieces with its sharp teeth. Everyone, we need to get out of here now, Kai instructed, and he didn't need to tell them twice. Xin noticed that Tom was still slightly frozen, so she grabbed him, dragging her classmate alongside them. Now that he was no longer looking at the beast, he continued to run with the others. What was that? That thing didn't look like any altered I ever saw. Inu asked as he ran. Who knows, it might be the thing responsible for all those killings on the news. Marie theorized. At the moment, the group was following Kai. Unfortunately, the park was large with big open fields. The impromptu group leader had a bad feeling that once the beast was done with his meal, that he would follow after them. At this late hour, the chances weren't great for them to find someone else in the park that might catch the werewolf's interest. Let's go through the trees. It will directly take us to the main street with a lot of people. It seems hungry, so hopefully it will be distracted by all the adults that will make more of a meal than us. Kai suggested. The others agreed, if only because they had no better idea and just wanted to get as far away from that thing as possible. Only Tom had a different thought running through his head. That must have been Gary. I bet he came right for me. One of those books mentioned that a werewolf would come after those that were closest to him as a human. So he either came for me, or Exine, or maybe even one of those people I don't know. This is probably the worst group to be with right now. Tom panicked, but he didn't dare to separate. At the same time, Exine had tried to make a call to a certain someone during their escape. Until today, she had thought that her trusted bodyguard would have been able to stop any gangsters that were after their group, but when faced against an altered, only another altered stood a chance. Come on, Jaden, why aren't you picking up? I really need your help right now. Exine prayed sincerely, but there was no answer on the other end. She could only send him a text about her emergency, hoping that he would read it sooner rather than later. The group entered the park's forest and began running through the trees, but that's when they noticed something up above. They could hear a being move at a fast speed, breaking down large branches as it went from one tree to another. Damn it! Why couldn't there be some large fat guy in the park today, hoping to lose a few pounds? That would have made for a tastier target. Kai lamented their lack of luck. His plan was sound, yet he didn't know that the werewolf was after one of their group in particular. Before they could get out of the forest, the beast had dropped down, blocking the path of the entire group. Now they were practically in the middle of nowhere with no one around to help them. But Marie had finally gotten through to someone on her phone. 999, what's your emergency? The operator asked. Help! We're in Seepin Park, and there is an altered attack dash. Marie shouted, but before she could finish, someone grabbed her head from behind and pushed it down into the leaves. It was so sudden and hard that some dirt had flown into her mouth. It was Xin whose quick reflexes had saved the other girl's life. The werewolf had leapt at Marie with the phone, seemingly understanding that it was a bad idea to allow her to finish the call. Luckily for the group, its hasty action had not only missed the werewolf's target, but it had also crashed into one of the trees behind them. Unfortunately, they all knew better than to hope that this would be enough to keep such a creature down. The werewolf stood up and started to look at them all, sniffing the air with its bloody snout. Gary, Tom shouted with tears in his eyes. Please don't attack us. Look at us, we're your friends. Part of you knows that, right? Please, you have to recognize my voice. The others believed that Tom had lost it and was now talking nonsense. How could this beast be Gary? Was he so far gone that he was hallucinating before his death? However, that name did elicit a reaction in the werewolf, and it stopped for a moment. Are you crazy? What part of him looks like that green head? This is a monster. Inu shouted at Tom. Hearing the sound of Inu's voice, the beast turned around facing the high schooler. The teenagers weren't sure if they were imagining it or not, but it almost looked like the beast was smiling, revealing its sharp teeth that still had parts of flesh stuck between them. It's going after Inu? Kai wondered. It dropped down on all fours before it charged at Inu. The teenager tried backing up, but found his back against a tree. OSH*T. Inu was convinced that would be the end of him, regretting having opened his mouth just now. As the beast was moving, though, 2 rocks came flying towards it, hitting it right in its face, with one of them nearly getting its eye, causing it to close it slightly. Inu did the only thing he could do, and decided to jump to safety as he saw the beast flinch. He successfully managed to roll on the ground underneath its side. It caused the werewolf to crash into another tree, breaking part of its lower half, and a few seconds later the tree toppled over. "Why did you guys stay? You should have run," Inu shouted, confused but thankful as he saw that Xin and Kai were the ones that had thrown the rocks. From the looks of it, they had gathered more and were ready to throw them again. "Just look at you. Once the thing would be done with you, it would swallow you whole in one bite. A few seconds won't do us much good. If that thing is going to kill us all anyway, might as well try and put up a fight." Kai explained his actions, while Xin just nodded along. "Fight? Kyle, have you gone completely mad? This isn't your average gang member. That thing killed a bodyguard in one hit. We'll be done if its claws so much as graze us," Marie shouted. "Gary," Tom continued to sob. The werewolf, recovering from its daze, turned around, yet once again focused on Inu. "What the hell did I ever do to you? Do you have some sort of fetish?" Inu was ready to cry. He had never been a dog person, but was that really a reason to kill him? So it wasn't a coincidence. This thing really seems to have a grudge with Inu, Kai realized. Even in a situation like this, Kai's mind was busy trying to make the optimal decision, and right now, it was connecting the dots. Hang on. A grudge against Inu. The news reports sudden strength. It can't be. Is that thing actually... The werewolf ran forward, and the group had to prepare for the worst. "Gary!" Tom shouted once more at the top of his lungs, afraid his friend was going to kill someone in front of him. *Awu! Asterisk. Another howl resounded, and Tom felt a gust pass him, before a blur of fur came out from his side. The blurry black object leapt and slammed into the werewolf's side, sending the 2 figures toppling through the woods. Soon, both of them stood up, and the group couldn't believe their eyes. "There are 2 of them," Xin cried out in despair.